she's a leader. She's not a follower. If she thinks that that is the good choice, the right choice for having a peaceful order, international order, she hasn't fear to do the right choice.
Nicola Procaccini, thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we are live in downtown Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us this morning on 89.3 FM, as mentioned, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube this morning. It is 13 degrees. That feels a little bit chilly. Our high today in Winnipeg is going to be 20. It's going to stay mainly cloudy as well. The cold spot right now is 0, right in the button. Thompson right now is 0. And the warm spot is Gimli, which is 18 degrees currently. We're on air with the morning show till 8:37 a.m. If you need us on the commute between now and then, 788-3093 is where you can reach Chloe Friesen. Good morning, Chloe. Chloe's directing the program and we'll be covering the commute. Good morning to Brad Lillies, who's also in our control room, and the triumphant return of my friend Abby Adeyemi, who is back behind the controls, tech on the show this morning. It is ahead of 6 o'clock, and let's go to Megan Ketchison, who is in for Heather Wells again today, and she has our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a woman is in critical condition in hospital after a car pedestrian last night. Police say it happened around 9:30 on McPhillips near McCrae. The driver did stay on the scene. The lanes were closed in the area until about 4 o'clock this morning. They're open now. The traffic division is investigating. And a downtown Winnipeg restaurant owner says business will never be the same because of the hybrid work week. Under a new federal policy that starts next month, civil servants will be required to spend at least 3 days per week at the office. The owner of the White Star Diner says that will help. His restaurant, he says, is only busy on days when workers are downtown. And I'll have more coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Well, let's return to our series, our Tuesday series. If you're a regular listener, then you know that every Tuesday throughout, the last 5 weeks, we've been asking what qualities are needed in the next chief of police for the city of Winnipeg as Danny Smythe prepares to retire. And so we are going this morning to talk to one of the decision makers as part of our series. The chair of the Winnipeg Police Board is going to weigh in on the priorities and what they're looking at as they approach selection. So stay tuned. Marcus Chambers will join us later on the program. In addition, back to school next week, we're going to talk about one of the new things that's happening in Manitoba, which is a cell phone ban of a certain age of students. Could that actually add to anxiety, not having that cell phone in the class? If you're a student who's used to that, we'll have that conversation and more. Stay tuned, though. World Report is up next.
On cue.
I'm Talia Schlanger, sitting in for Tom Power. The last time Sheryl Crow was on the show, she said she was probably done making records. She'll tell you how thinking about the dangers of artificial intelligence motivated her to get back into the studio making new music.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. China's government is responding to Canada's decision to impose tariffs on electric vehicles made in that country.
These actions undermine China-Canada trade ties, harm Canadian companies and consumers' interests, and do no good to Canada's green transition and global climate response. China deploys and opposes these actions.
Lin Jian, a spokesperson for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, speaking in Beijing this morning. Canada announced the 100% tariff on Chinese-made EVs sold in Canada yesterday at the Liberal Cabinet retreat in Halifax. For now, China is just talking. But as Susanna De Silva reports, the big question is what might a Chinese response look like and what Canadian industries may be a target?
To look at where they can impose or apply the maximum pain for Canada's exports.
International trade lawyer Lawrence Herman expects the target will be the agricultural sector. Things like canola and pork, previously targeted by China during political tensions between the two countries.
They have other markets, and they'll have to use other markets and other tools to diversify away from China.
Veena Najibullah with the Asia Pacific Foundation says Canada didn't have a choice, saying there was a real possibility of China flooding the EV market with heavily subsidized vehicles.
By 2030, China is projected to be producing over 70 million vehicles, which is about twice what the global projected demand is going to be. So if we were to allow that to happen, essentially there will be no manufacturing of cars or EVs anywhere outside of China.
The U.S. and Europe have already announced their own tariffs on Chinese EVs.
Whatever happens next, it's important for Canada, U.S., European Union, and other like-minded democracies to coordinate their response and not get into an escalatory tit-for-tat cycle, but on the other hand, be able to stand firm.
Canada's tariffs take effect October 1st. Susana da Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Canada's relationship with the United States is expected to dominate discussion in Halifax today. It's the final day of the cabinet retreat. The partnership between the two countries has been a key priority for the Trudeau government ahead of this year's American election. Kate McKenna is covering the retreat.
You know, the U.S. and Canada are neighbors. That's true in a geographic sense, obviously, but it's also true in a much deeper sense.
When U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan made a surprise visit to the federal cabinet retreat, he was effusive in his praise.
I just want to take a moment especially to say thank you to the Prime Minister, who has been a tremendous partner to President Biden.
For the final day of the retreat, the focus will shift to U.S.-Canada relations and maintaining that positive relationship. Ambassador Kirsten Hillman is expected to address cabinet, so are two former ambassadors. It's part of the Trudeau government's focus on its Team Canada strategy, a plan to create jobs and increase trade. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly.
We will engage, notwithstanding who is elected in the White House. We've gone through an Obama administration, we've worked with the Trump administration, and we have worked with the Biden administration, and we will be ready when it comes to November.
The strategy is similar to what Canada did after Trump won the 2016 election. Canadian officials traveled through the United States, making the case for continued cooperation between the two countries. Ottawa has already begun talks with members of Donald Trump's circle about avoiding new trade tariffs if he's elected U.S. president this fall. We're expecting to hear an update on how this plan is going sometime today. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Halifax.
Both Russia and Ukraine have been on the offensive overnight. A bulldozer digs through rubble in the central Ukrainian city of Kryvyi Rih. Local officials say at least 2 people were killed when a Russian missile struck a hotel. Russia did not comment on that report, but the governor of Russia's Belgorod region says Ukrainian forces are trying to punch through the border there. Hundreds of Ukrainian troops reportedly tried to attack 2 checkpoints. The United Nations says it has to pause the movement of aid within Gaza. Officials say safety concerns and a new Israeli evacuation order in central Gaza is affecting their operations. The Israeli military claims it's working to dismantle Hamas infrastructure it says still remains there. Sasha Petrusik is following developments from Jerusalem.
Tents cling to the sand at the edge of Gaza, almost falling into the sea. We used to play on these beaches, says one man. Now it's the only place left to live. 90% of Gaza's population has been displaced. Now more than 250,000 have been told to move again, ordered out of Deir al-Bala in the south so that Israeli military operations can continue. Israel says Hamas fighters are hiding there. Premature babies and injured patients are moved from Al-Aqsa Hospital, one of the last major facilities left, now emptied. Others form long lines at the few aid distribution sites still open. We've been injured getting aid, but there's no choice, says a man as he waits. NGOs like Doctors Without Borders are considering pulling out. UN work is at a standstill. Louise Wateridge is with UNRWA, the main organization helping Palestinians.
The humanitarian operations are just shrinking because of these displacement orders. So lives are being lost, people are not receiving aid. It's just a complete disaster for us trying to do our jobs on the ground here.
That's not likely to change soon, as Israel plans continued operations throughout the south. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Water cannons and tear gas are being used on protesters in Calcutta, India this morning. Security guards around the state's government buildings are trying to force them out. People across India continue to demand justice for a trainee doctor who was raped and murdered at a Calcutta hospital earlier this month. A police volunteer has been arrested in connection with the case. Quebec Provincial Police have issued an Amber Alert. They're looking for a 5-year-old boy named Gary Shigao. Police say he was abducted last night in Brossard on Montreal's South Shore. Officers say the boy may be inside a white 2024 Model 3 Tesla with an Ontario license plate, GVM K56. The suspect is a 65-year-old woman named Youngray Shui. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward. Pedestrian-only streets are becoming more popular in Canadian cities. Local businesses get more foot traffic and tourists enjoy strolling freely in the streets. But in Banff, town council is granting their pedestrian-only zone just a few more days of operation. As Acton Clarkin tells us, the area was not popular with some people who call the town home.
Banff Avenue is the main artery through one of Canada's tourism hotspots. It turns into a car-free zone every year from the May-long weekend to Thanksgiving, an initiative that began during the pandemic. But not everyone who lives there loves it.
It pushes all of the commercial traffic, trucks, buses, and vehicles into the residential neighborhood.
That's former Banff Mayor Leslie Taylor. She's firmly against the pedestrian zone, citing traffic and emergency evacuation concerns. Her side narrowly won out in a recent town plebiscite against zone supporters, forcing council to pass a binding bylaw on Monday to open the street back up to cars early this summer, and stopping the ped zone from coming back in years ahead. The original plan was to start the dismantling on Tuesday, but a last-minute proposal passed by council will see the work pushed back by a week until the day after Labor Day. Hugh Pettigrew is a local councillor.
I think this represents a fair and balanced approach that honors a democratic decision while also allowing our community a brief period to transition and adapt.
That includes local restaurants. Many have set up patios on the blocked-off road. The town of Banff says after this weekend they'll have to pack up their gear, and contractors will start to remove planters, bollards, and bike racks too. Acton Clarkin, CBC News, Calgary.
15 years ago, when Oasis broke up, the band broke the hearts of fans around the world. But the English rockers are reuniting.
But before tomorrow, here's my friend said.
Brothers and co-founding members Liam and Noel Gallagher have apparently put aside their differences. This morning, they announced 14 concert dates in the UK and Ireland for summer 2025. They include 4 nights at London's Wembley Stadium and 4 dates in their hometown of Manchester. Plans are also in the works for the band to tour outside Europe. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
You need to be
when fights with your brother get in the way of making music. Oasis. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Welcome to the morning show. It is Tuesday morning, August 27th. Great to be with you each and every morning. Beautiful sky out there right now. A little cooler. It is in Winnipeg right now, just around 13 degrees. Thanks for joining us on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. This hour on the program, yesterday, if you were with us, there was news that broke late in the show talking about what the federal government is doing regarding China. They're imposing new tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and a 25% surtax on steel and aluminum imports. You've been hearing about that in national news, but we're going to discuss what that means overall in the landscape for businesses and consumers. So stay tuned. That's at 10 to 7 this morning. Also ahead this hour on the program, negotiators spending the weekend in Cairo trying to come up with the agreement that would stop the bombing of Gaza and bring the hostages back to Israel. We also have analysis of that. Sasha Petrusik just now on World Report talking about how 90% of Gaza's population has now been displaced. So stay tuned for that conversation as well. Right now to local news headlines. Megan Ketchison joins us this morning again. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a traveling Midway says it may have to tear down its carnival for good because of new federal rules. Wonder Shows has been a staple of Manitoba summer fairs for years, but that could be in jeopardy. The federal government is restricting the number of temporary foreign workers it accepts. The owner is worried that'll hurt his business. Around half of his staff are seasonal workers from Jamaica. And a city councillor is pleased to see plans for a new rec centre in southeast Winnipeg is moving forward. St. Vital councillor Brian Mays says the Sage Creek and Bonavista neighbourhoods are growing. The city has talked since 2009 about building a new recreation centre in the area, but now it's looking for a contractor for a feasibility study. And I'll have more at 6:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
Abby Adeyemi, I haven't talked to you on the air in a while. How you doing?
Good morning. Yeah, it's a cool start for me. I didn't want to get out of bed this morning. Just saying.
You did return on a day where we're sort of making the transitional shift after all the heat. So what's coming for the forecast?
Well, across the province, we're going to be seeing more like cloudy skies today, and the highs will be hovering between 17 and 20. Though breeze in some areas, and then we'll see some clear skies tonight because it's going to be cloudy most of the day. Currently, Winnipeg 13 degrees, clear skies we're seeing. Expect mostly cloudy conditions today. We're headed for a high of 20. No rain is expected during the day today, but something tomorrow. In other regions, we're going to see this cool start across the province. Thompson is at 1 at the moment.
Wait, refresh your screen because I did mine, and guess what just happened?
What just happened to Thompson?
-1.
Oh, shoot.
I know.
I was like, that's like almost
You're speaking on behalf of all Manitobans right now.
Oh shoot, minus. Okay, so refresh. Thompson now at -1, and I'm just going to chip it in there. 17 more weekends to Christmas. Moving on, Churchill is at 9 degrees and clear, heading to a high of 17. Brandon, Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach, and Morris Hall hovering between 7 and 11 degrees. 13 in Winnipeg. It's going to be cloudy today, clearing tonight, and then we'll say high of 20. I did not say that.
You know, it's still the best reaction ever because everyone else was saying it at home. All right, let's get into what's going on in traffic. Chloe Friesen, what do you know?
I mean, I can't tell you how many weekends there are until Christmas.
That's Abby's
job. That's a special skill.
Oh,
That's
he's got
incredible.
a countdown clock.
17.
He's all about it.
Amazing. Yeah, my news not as exciting. There's nothing happening on the commute quite yet, but of course, if something is getting in your way, if you spot a stall or collision, or maybe you're an active commuter and you have a tip for other active commuters, let us know. Call our commuter line. Happy to take those calls. 204-788-3093.
Oh, fall. You are certainly right around the corner now. Well, there's been a lot of debate about the use of generative artificial intelligence in the classroom. Speaking of what's right around the corner, back to class. Some teachers have argued that AI can help students with research and critical thinking skills. Others, though, say it can pose challenges with copyright and with plagiarism concerns, as we've had some here in Winnipeg, of course. At the University of Manitoba, there are tools being offered to help both professors and students use this technology as it does continue to evolve. But there are also disciplinary measures and limits on how the technology can be used. Chloe, who you just heard, was guest hosting Up to Speed yesterday, and she spoke about this with Mark Torsha, who's Vice Provost of Teaching and Learning at the U of M, to learn more.
So as AI becomes more and more popular, how are you asking educators to use it as a tool in the classroom?
There's lots of hype about AI and lots of thought and consideration about it. I think, it's in a significant state of flux. And so as the systems are being refined and we're learning more about them and their capabilities, we're starting to think about how that might be used in the classroom. And I think it is, in fact, opening lots of positive opportunities for students and faculty and staff at the university.
Has that made it difficult to set rules and regulations and kind of guidelines for the use of AI in the classroom?
I would say, it certainly raises concerns for faculty and for students, frankly. I think students are seeing this as a potential tool to support them in their learning experience. And of course, they're trying to balance that against, what would be an appropriate use. Faculty are starting to learn more about AI and thinking about, well, how might this best support my students in their learning experience? And of course, there's always that opportunity for those two things to collide around, well, I thought I could use it for this. Well, you're not supposed to use it for that. And so people are beginning to develop guidelines. Certainly we are at the university and have been for some length of time, as are other institutions across Canada. Faculty are being quite specific about how students can or should not use AI, and most of that is contained within the development of their syllabus. So each course has an outline of what's happening with assignments. How are you being assessed? What topics are we going to cover in the class? And so instructors are now beginning to set some guidelines around the use of AI for those classes, and it varies depending on the type of course and the type of assignment. But certainly, we have outstanding faculty out here, and our students really have a desire to learn, and I think those two things are really working out together to create a really positive opportunity.
One of the largest concerns, not only in university but all school ages, is about AI potentially causing challenges with plagiarism. How are professors managing this? Are you hearing stories of copyright and plagiarism issues?
Well, we're certainly seeing cases where students have used AI inappropriately, and of course things like ChatGPT reach out into the pool of knowledge, for instance, the internet, and then draw in information that may or may not be appropriately cited in the information, and the student may not even indicate that they used AI. And certainly in those circumstances, students can cross over that line around what's the appropriate use. But frankly, students, if a student wanted to plagiarize, there are other opportunities to do that. It wouldn't just have to be through AI. So we really focus on educating students around what's an appropriate use, why should you or why should you not use the tool in any given circumstance.
I think an additional question here is, how are educators able to tell when AI is being used inappropriately compared to other cases of plagiarism? Are there programs available?
So we certainly have a number of experts out here at the University of Manitoba specifically looking at that question around, can you detect whether AI has generated something or not? And as the ability of AI systems develops and expands, there's a similar following but multiple steps back for other systems that are trying to say, well, this was AI generated and this was not AI generated.
Right, it sounds complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated. And, as it progresses, they both get better, but there's always a gap in between them. And right now, there are not good systems out there for determining whether something has been generated by AI. My advice to faculty and instructors is always, think about what the goal of the assessment is. Have a discussion with your students about, potential utility of AI and how they might be able to use it, and lay some ground rules within your course to determine what makes sense. But running every student's essay or assignment through an app to determine whether it's been done by generative AI is just not there, not in a meaningful way.
So if a student was determined to have used AI to cheat on an essay or an assignment, what kind of disciplinary action would they face?
Well, it depends on, kind of what level. Was it identified in the syllabus that you should not be using generative AI? If it was, and you have cheated on an assignment, it's treated just like any other case of breach of academic integrity, whether you worked on it with someone else inappropriately, whether you used other resources inappropriately, did you copy things right off of the internet and then not cite? So they all kind of fit into that academic integrity concerns, and there are a set of consequences for student depending on the level of their cheating. That could be as as simple as getting an F on the assignment. It could be potentially, having to get out of that course, and where considerations have been multiple and it's been quite grievous. I mean, it could even lead to suspension. So there's a whole range of things, but of course, in any situation, we always look to learn more about what's happened, why it's happened, and what the appropriate consequence might be.
Now, Mark, you mentioned citing sources, and I'm getting a little bit into the weeds here, but I'm curious. When it comes to students maybe using something like ChatGPT as a source for research, are there guidelines on how students can cite generative AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Just as there are guidelines for instructors and faculty at the university if they're using ChatGPT to assist in writing a paper or writing a research proposal. You need to indicate that you have used it. And so, yes, we're developing more and more ways of citing that, more and more ways of indicating exactly how it was used. So, yes, we're all learning as we're going along, but I think we're doing a pretty good job in supporting students through their learning experience and setting up some appropriate guidelines to facilitate that learning. Even learning about AI is an important consideration here at the university.
That was Mark Torsha, Vice Provost of Teaching and Learning at the University of Manitoba, in conversation with Chloe Friesen yesterday on Up to Speed about how the university is preparing for more use of AI in the classrooms in post-secondary this fall. Red River, by the way, students went back yesterday already. 6:22 a.m. is the time right now. It is Tuesday morning. Thanks for joining us. It's cool out there. You're going to notice it. It's 13 degrees. It's partly cloudy. Brandon's mainly clear in 10, and in Thompson, depending on where you're standing, it's 1 or -1. Yeah, we said it, below zero. So we're heading today in Winnipeg for a daytime high of 20. Well, next on the program, let's return to what is making national and international news today. The deal to bring home the hostages and end the bombing of Gaza. It is still, however, elusive. Negotiations resumed in Cairo over the weekend, although the progress was reported by senior U.S. officials. A final agreement is not guaranteed anytime soon, despite that progress that was reported. To walk us through what issues are still top of mind and where we're at, Jamie Levin is with us, Associate Professor of Political Science at St. Francis Xavier University. Good morning.
Good morning.
So it looked like there would be an agreement at the beginning of July. Can you just sort of walk us briefly, for those that haven't been following all the developments, how we got here?
Yeah, certainly. I'll go back to May. In May, President Biden made an announcement that Hamas was no longer capable of conducting major terrorist operations against Israel, and he put forward a plan to end of hostilities. Remember, there had been pauses in the fighting before. There was a week-long pause in November that saw the release of 80 Israelis, 25 foreign nationals held by Hamas in exchange for 240 Palestinian prisoners. So Biden was looking to restart those negotiations. He put forth a plan that continues to form the basis of the on-again, off-again negotiations that continue today. The plan has 3 phases. The first phase is a 6-week ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated area of Gaza, a release of an unspecified number of Israeli and American hostages in exchange for the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Palestinian civilians would be allowed to return to their homes and reconstruct their homes, and aid would be flooded in. During that time, Israel would negotiate a permanent end of hostilities with Hamas, and that would constitute the second phase of this plan. During that second phase, all the remaining hostages would be released, and negotiations would begin for phase 3. Phase 3 is the day after. That is the start of major reconstruction in Gaza. Now, it looked, as you said, like there was progress being made on the talks in mid-July, but in mid-July, Hamas walked out of the talks. They claimed that Israel introduced new conditions, while Israel has claimed that it has only clarified its positions.
So what are the demands from both sides at the table? Where are we at this morning?
Well, where we're at is the negotiations over the weekend There were 4 rounds of talks, and those sticking points that appeared in July appear to still be holding the parties up. Those key sticking points seem to be, one, Israel's insistence on remaining in areas of the Gaza Strip after fighting, after the fighting stops, I should say. 2, whether the ceasefire will be permanent, and 3, who's going to be in charge of Gaza when the war ends. And I'll elaborate on those a little bit. First, Israel wants to retain control over certain areas of the Gaza Strip, even after a ceasefire agreement's reached. In particular, they want to remain in control of the area between Gaza and Egypt, what they call the Philadelphia corridor, as well as a section that bisects the Strip in half, more or less in the middle. This is the so-called Netzarim corridor. Israel insists on remaining in between Gaza and Egypt to prevent the smuggling of weapons into Gaza, and it insists on retaining that corridor that cuts the Strip in half to prevent the movement of weapons and militants to the north alongside civilians who will be allowed to return in a ceasefire agreement.
Okay.
Egypt and Hamas both want a complete Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. They refuse any...
So that's a point of impasse.
That's point of impasse number 1.
Okay.
Second, Hamas wants a permanent truce. Israel wants the option to resume fighting and to eliminate Hamas. That is impasse number 2. Third and related, Israel insists that Hamas has to give up control of the enclave. Hamas, for its part, absolutely refuses this condition. It intends to be the governing authority after the cessation of hostilities. It wants to oversee reconstruction, Biden's phase 3, the plan for the day after.
So where do we go from here? What direction do you expect these talks to take now, especially because Hamas is not even at the table?
Yeah, I think what we also saw this past weekend was a major escalation. It's not the first time we've seen a major escalation in this conflict, but over the weekend, Israel and Hezbollah exchanged major fire. Israel made what it called a preemptive strike against thousands of Hezbollah rocket launchers. Hezbollah managed to fire off about 300 rockets into the north. This was the largest barrage of rockets from southern Lebanon since the start of this war. In the background is always this looming fear that this could become a 2 or 3 front war, a regional war that brings in other actors. Now, it's on that backdrop that the Americans, the Qataris, and the Egyptians have brought the parties to the table, or at least tried. That's what they were working on this weekend, this final ceasefire proposal, this bridging proposal. I believe the Americans will continue with these negotiations. The Americans this weekend, though they've expressed frustration with Israel pretty consistently, this weekend, Antony Blinken, the American Secretary of State, has said that Israel has softened its demands and has accepted the bridging proposal. So Blinken has placed the onus on Hamas for the lack of progress. I think the Americans want the talks to continue. They fear a widening war. And of course, it would provide Democrats a much-needed win before November's presidential election. The problem is neither side, Israel or Hamas, seems overly concerned with reaching an agreement. They appear perfectly content to continue fighting.
Jamie Levin, thank you very much for bringing us up to this point. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That's Jamie Levin, an associate professor of political science at St. Francis Xavier University. We reached him this morning for some analysis of the developments over the weekend in the Middle East. We're coming up to 6:30. I'm Marcy Marcusa. The commute's moving fine. If you need us, though, 788-3093 for your Tuesday morning. A little chilly out there as we inch toward the end of August here. Coming up, we have business news, and Canadians are borrowing more this year than in 2023. So we'll look at what those latest figures tell us. We're also going to dig deeper into the imposed tariffs on a series of products coming from China. We already talked about the EVs on the program, so Phil DeMont will join us after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg at 6:30, partly cloudy and 9. Another cooler day today, mainly cloudy and a high of 20. A woman is in critical condition in hospital after a car pedestrian crash last night. Police say it happened around 9:30 on McPhillip Street and McCrae. The driver did stay on the scene. Lanes were closed in the area until about 4 this morning, but they have reopened. One downtown Winnipeg restaurant owner says the hybrid work week will cost him a lot of business. Under a new federal policy, civil servants will be required to spend at least 3 days per week in the office. Bruce Smets of the White Star Diner says that's good news, but he says the days of pre-pandemic business are gone.
Like, our business over the last 8 months has really improved. Like, it's gotten much better, but I don't think it'll ever be back to what it was before. So, but we're profitable and making money. And
Smets says his restaurant is only busy on days when workers are downtown. He wishes more of them would be in the area 5 days a week. The federal rules for a hybrid work week start next month. Manitoba Hydro and MPI have hybrid work weeks. Neither has any plans to expand to full-time office work for all employees. A traveling Midway may have to tear down its carnival for good because of new federal rules. Wonder Shows has been a staple of Manitoba summer fairs for years, but that could be in jeopardy. The federal government is restricting the number of temporary foreign workers it accepts. Wonder Shows owner Ken Kernicki is worried that'll hurt his business. Around half his staff are seasonal workers from Jamaica. Kernicki says the new rules limiting foreign workers could be devastating for his business.
If I don't get them, I'm going to shut my doors because I just can't find people to work. I mean, we advertise. Nobody's coming looking for this kind of job. It's been tough our whole life, and it seems to be tougher now.
It's unclear at this point if Wonder Shows will be impacted by the new policy. The feds are planning to refuse applications for low-wage workers in areas of high unemployment. The details haven't been announced. Residents in southeast Winnipeg may soon have a new rec facility. The city has put out a request for a feasibility study on the Bona Vista Recreation Centre. Plans for the new recreation plex go back as far as 2009. St. Vital councillor Brian Mays says the community needs the new facility to serve the growing population.
There's no library. There's no running track. I think these people deserve some sort of community facility where they can meet. So hopefully we can get all three levels of government on the same page and get this thing built.
The new facility will serve a population of more than 10,000 people in the Sage Creek and Bona Vista neighborhoods. The city has budgeted $5 million for the construction of the centre, set to start in 2026. Mays expects the total project to cost around $12 million. Well, in national news, today is the final day of the annual federal cabinet retreat, and it focuses to shift Canada's relationship with the United States. As Kate McKenna reports, it's been a key priority for the Trudeau government ahead of this year's American election.
The U.S. and Canada are neighbors. That's true in a geographic sense, obviously, but it's also true in a much deeper sense.
When U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan made a surprise visit to the federal cabinet retreat, he was effusive in his praise. For the final day of the retreat, the focus will shift to U.S.-Canada relations and maintaining that positive relationship. Ambassador Kirsten Hillman is expected to address cabinet, so are two former ambassadors. It's part of the Trudeau government's focus on its Team Canada strategy, a plan to create jobs and increase trade. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly.
We will engage, notwithstanding who is elected in the White House.
The strategy is similar to what Canada did after Trump won the 2016 election. Canadian officials traveled through the United States, making the case for continued cooperation between the two countries. Ottawa has already begun talks with members of Donald Trump's circle about avoiding new trade tariffs if he's elected U.S. president this fall. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Halifax.
China is lashing out at Canada for imposing new tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles and warns there could be consequences to come. Lin Jian is with the Chinese Foreign Ministry. He spoke through an interpreter this morning.
China urges Canada to respect facts, abide by WTO rules, immediately correct its wrongdoings, and not to politicize trade issues. China will take all measures necessary to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese businesses.
Yesterday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a 100% surtax on electrical vehicles from China.
We are transforming Canada's automotive sector to be a global leader in building the vehicles of tomorrow. But actors like China have chosen to give themselves an unfair advantage in the global marketplace.
A new tariff is supposed to start on October 1st. And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you, Megan Ketchison.
Thank you.
Let's get into our forecast now. It's time for the regional forecast. So we'll look around our main centers with Abby Adeyemi.
It's cool across board, I'll tell you. We'll experience a mix of sun and clouds at some point, mostly cloudy conditions. We'll see temperatures ranging from 17 to 21 and some breezy conditions in most of these regions. And then for tonight, clear skies will roll in and a chance of showers and thunderstorm in some areas. Winnipeg at 13 at this time. Today's outlook looks like it's going to be bringing mainly cloudy conditions, sunny breaks here and there, and we're heading to a high of 20. Brandon is sitting at 10 degrees now, also clear, expecting some clouds to roll in this morning, and then it's going to clear in the afternoon. We're looking at a high of 21 for folks in Brandon. Good morning to our friends in Thompson. You're still hovering between that -1 and 0 at this time, though it's clear. You should get some sunny conditions to warm you up later, and then you will warm up to 20. And tonight, partly clear skies will come your way, and you cool down to 6. Further north in Churchill, we are at 9 degrees at this time. Expect sunshine today with clouds moving in this afternoon. The forecasted high is 17. The breeze will be light this morning, then becoming breezy in the afternoon, and we'll see a low of 9 degrees later tonight. Darwin is sitting at 8 degrees. We're seeing some mist in that part of the province at this time. Today will also bring some sunny conditions, a high of 23, and tonight you see some clear skies. Gimli, 11 and clear. The Interlake region would see mainly cloudy conditions, heading to a high of 20. Steinbach at 11 and clear. Today will also be mainly cloudy, with a high of 20. And for Morris, also the same condition there, 11 and clear. Today's forecast for the Pembina Valley region calls for mainly cloudy conditions, aiming for a high of 20. Most regions in the south, we're looking at, it's going to be mainly cloudy, and then it's going to clear tonight, and tomorrow will be sunny. We're looking at a high of 20. But right now, Winnipeg, it's going to be mostly cloudy today and a high of 20. No rain in the forecast. Currently, it's 13 degrees.
Now, before Abby, we turn our attention to Chloe. Hello, Chloe, who's here with the commute.
Hello.
Let's share some comments from the listeners, because I posted on Facebook last night, what was your Manitoba moment of the summer? I know we're not done yet, but so I got a whole bunch of beautiful pictures there. We'll try to get them up on YouTube in the next hour. But people were all over the place, so I want to share a couple. Becky Lett says, digging for rocks at Souris Rock Pit. She says, we started a new hobby as a result. Linda Kelly was relaxing by the lake. Erica Glazier went tubing in Pinawa and said, I had no idea something so beautiful and fun was nearby. I was just vacationing in BC, she writes, and this would have cost 5 times as much and been 20 times more crowded. So I've heard a lot of people doing that event. Candy Shelby saying, I love going to Clear Lake with my kids and grandkids. Maureen Morrish, now this one I'm jealous of. Eating East Coast lobster that was flown in the night before from someone she knows. We had a 5-course feast at Graham Beach. With family. Doesn't that sound good? Lobster on the beach.
Oh, yeah. Very, very lovely. I had my moment also. Remember, before going on my break, I told you I'll be hunting for the sunflowers, and I was looking here and there, and I had to drive all the way to Low Farms in Morris to go find some sunflowers.
Oh, you did the Low Farm in Morris thing. Right around, that Altona area is all famous for that. I bet you got lots of great pictures.
I got lots of them.
So weigh in online. There's so many comments, and they always bring me so much joy and pride too, right? When people talk about being around the province. So weigh in on Facebook. We'll get some pictures up through the show when we get a chance. And that's my Marcy Marcusa page, which acts as a show page, during the show. Chloe Friesen, I don't know if you have your moment yet. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I do have my moment.
Okay.
And it's a photo moment. So I'm going to make sure that we get that up on the live stream. Okay. My favorite thing to do in the summer is just to get out of the city. I have family in rural Manitoba. I grew up in rural Manitoba. So it's always like just a nice reset to go visit family. So I visited my grandparents in Killarney, Manitoba.
Shout out to Killarney.
And they live in a lovely little condo right beside a wheat field.
Oh,
and
nice.
It's got a gorgeous grain elevator in the distance. And the sunsets over that wheat field and the grain elevator are just incredible. So I went for a nice bike ride on some dirt roads, and I just followed that sunset, and I just took photos, and it was just very nice prairie summer moment.
You have now written half of a country song.
Ooh! If only I had any musical talent to go along with it.
Abby says you missed a tractor. We'll have to write it at 7
o'clock.
Oh, yeah. But that sounds
There
lovely.
was a train.
Okay,
There was
train.
a train in
we'll
the
write
distance.
a train
Does that
into the
help?
lyrics. It does.
Okay.
We actually should write a Manitoba song of the summer. This is the start of a good idea. Right
Yeah.
now, let's find
Yeah.
out what's moving out there in the morning commute.
Nothing. Well, things are moving. So actually, lots of things are moving. But I haven't heard anything that's getting in folks' ways. There's a lovely sunrise out there, so hopefully that's making your commute even better. But if there is something that is slowing you down, I would love to hear from you. You can let us know by calling our commuter line at 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Chloe. It's time for our business report now with Phil DeMont. Good morning, Phil.
Hi, Marcy.
So on Monday, Canada imposing these tariffs on a series of products coming from China. Megan just talking about the EVs. What's the thinking behind this move?
Yeah, I've divided it up into two areas, and there's just different justifications for them depending upon which product you're talking about. As you were mentioning in the news, tariffs 100% on electric vehicles. Tariffs also 25% on Chinese steel and aluminum. Now, both of these are set to come into effect in October. Decision comes after a weekend visit to the federal cabinet in Halifax from U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Washington and the EU have already levied similar duties on Chinese products. In fact, they went further. They went after computer chips and a bunch of other things, although the EU just actually cut its electric vehicle tariffs on some vehicles coming from China. So you start with that area. The concern here is that China is producing a decent quality electric vehicle at a low price, $12,000 US versus the average EV price in Canada, at least the one I found last year, $73,000. Ottawa justified the move by talking about China's unfair labor practices. To be honest, Marcy, it's always the stuff we bring up whenever we get after China. But we don't import a lot of electric vehicles right now. In fact, I think we just do the Teslas out of Shanghai. And the thinking is that the Tesla will just move its manufacturing to some other offshore facility and export into Canada that way. So these tariffs are generally seen as a straight-up protection for Canada's domestic car makers, that they can't compete right now on that price. So if China starts exporting into the U.S., especially, but also into Canada, it'll be a problem. Steel and aluminum, they're different. Widely held view is that China has produced too much of both commodities in order to keep people in that country employed. They're going basically through a bit of a recession. So the new tariffs are to offset China's dumping of these products at cut-rate prices, a little more of a standard kind of trade protection area. The potential problems in Canada's approach, one, the tariffs act like a tax for Canadians. So prices probably will stay higher than they otherwise would be the case, especially if you think about what steel and aluminum goes into a lot of products. So that's going to keep those prices a little higher. Chinese government also, as it was mentioned in the news, likely to retaliate, especially against Canadian agricultural exports, because they've done it in the past with canola and other products. So don't be surprised if they China basically goes after our farmers once again.
To another story, Canadians are borrowing more this year than we did in 2023. What do the figures say?
Yeah, not what you might expect. The numbers come from Equifax Canada, the credit company. Debt held by Canadian consumers, $2.5 trillion, April to June period, second quarter this year. That's an increase of 4%. Versus the same period last year. Economists had been expecting an increase in debt because of the slowing economy plus higher interest rates. But it's not mortgage debt causing the increase, it's credit cards. Equifax estimates outstanding credit card balances, $122 billion, but that's up 14%. So think of the 4% I just talked about. If you have plastic, on average, your balance, $4,300. That's a ton, and it's the highest level since 2007. And the delinquency rate, the highest rate since 2011. Mortgage debt isn't as bleak. Last year, Canada's home buying debt is the highest among Western industrialized countries. So that's not great. But the growth in home debt has slowed. And the rate at which Canadians are missing mortgage payments still lower than it was before the pandemic. Overall, Statistics Canada estimates that the debt-to-income levels for Canadians, it's a measure, it's been very high, has started to fall in recent quarters. So a lot of debt out there, but some of the news is positive.
Sounds like maybe people are putting more essentials on the credit cards and such. That's the big concern, right? If you start needing that for groceries, and so you might be paying your housing, but
no, you're right.
Reflection of the economy. To another story before markets this morning. Why is the world's most expensive coin collection set to go on sale next month?
Because the 100-year prohibition on its sale, it's up in September. Lars Emil Brun created a butter empire in Denmark in the 19th century. At his time, he also built up a huge coin collection, one of the largest around, British, Danish, Swedish currency. So he dies in 1923, and his will, Brun says, keep my coins as backup for the royal collection of coins and medals at the Danish National Museum. It's a big deal over there. But keep them back for 100 years. That restriction gets lifted next month. So his heir is finally set to sell off the collection, probably wanted to for a while. It's insured for $72 million, but probably will fetch more than that at auction. And the first part of the collection is set to go on auction September 14th. One question, where the collection actually is, because Brun hid the coins after the First World War, and there's only a few people who know the actual location of the collection, so you probably don't want all those people in the car at the same time.
What's going on in the market so far this morning, Phil?
Right now, Europe, it's positive. Germany, France, UK, all up. A little more mixed in Asia, but the Nikkei in Japan was up. Oil's down 40 cents, $77.02 U.S. a barrel. Gold's down $8, $2,547 an ounce. And the Canadian dollar up more than a quarter of a cent in the past 2 days, mainly on U.S. dollar weakness, 74.27 cents U.S.
All right. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is Phil DeMont from our CBC Business Desk with our report this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You are with CBC and still ahead on the program this morning after 7 o'clock. For over 60 years, as you may have heard in the news, a traveling carnival has been encouraging Manitobans to add some thrill to their lives. But now the local owners are fearing this new federal policy that's going to limit foreign temporary workers. They say that could be a huge issue for them. It could, in fact, put an end to the fun. So we're going to find out more about that. Stay tuned for that story after 7 o'clock. We have local music, though, right now. Being Elsewhere Mix is a new collection of tunes from Dan Mangan. So Being Elsewhere Mix features reimagined versions of older songs and covers of artists like Bob Dylan and Damien Uredo and the Lumineers. There's also some new ones. So here's Dan Mangan with Call Me Up High.
If you're lost in your vices and you need to love someone, babe, I ain't perfect, but I'm pretty good. Clutch in a crisis and free to be certain. If you just need someone who will answer, well, you know I could. Call me up high. Call me up high. I'm standing by. Call me up high.
Dan Mangan and Call Me Up High on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. It is 10 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Next on our Tuesday morning show, in an attempt to, quote, level the playing field for Canadian workers, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, as we've been hearing in the news, did announce yesterday that Canada will place new tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Now, this is a move that is similar to the one that the U.S. made recently, and it is meant to help our EV industry compete locally and globally. Now, we've already had some analysis on our business report and in the news this morning, but we have a full interview about this with Stuart True next. He's a trade researcher with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, first of all, how large are the tariffs that the federal government's going to impose on Chinese EVs and also on steel and aluminum?
So on the vehicles, it's 100% surtax. So this is an additional tariff on top of a 6% tariff that we impose on vehicles from China. Now that's going to affect electric and hybrid cars, trucks, buses, and other vehicles, and it will come into effect on October 1st. So as well as that, we have this 25% surtax on imports of certain aluminum and steel products from China. This is kind of an additional safeguard on top of some existing anti-dumping and countervailing duties Canada has in place for many years on similar products. And that's going to come into effect October 15th. And as you said, both of those really mirror what the Biden administration announced it was going to do in May and hasn't quite finalized yet. So I think in some ways it's foreshadowing. In some ways, I think we can see that the U.S. is probably going to announce something similar in the next few days.
How could the new tariffs, in your view, reshape the EV market in Canada's auto business? Phil was just talking on the business report about the vast difference in price point for EVs because of perhaps related to how the labor market and how they're built. Yeah.
I think on their own, this is not going to do much to reshape the North American or Canadian industries. What it does is it gets ahead of a potential surge or entry of Chinese brand, China-made electric vehicles on the North American market. It's intended to provide further protection or some additional protection, I suppose, to our own electrification as we see companies gradually, maybe too gradually, some would say, too slowly, transitioning their gas production to electric models. But, we have a growing market for electric vehicles in North America. Hyundai, other Japanese, European producers, as well as North American producers, are putting new models on every year. They're maybe not like the most affordable models as we've seen in China and in Europe, but that's happening. And so I think this is a bit of a temporary reprieve. It's up to us to figure out what we do to encourage these companies or even require them to be making more affordable vehicles in the next few years.
From a consumer standpoint, the tariffs could have the opposite effect. They could further slow down, and you just said some are saying, we're not fast enough already. Could this further slow down the growth of our EV market in this country?
Well, I don't, I think it's not necessarily helpful to think in those terms. If we look at how China developed its own system, right, its own electric vehicle market, it's not like they did it with extensive state subsidies. They did it with extensive trade restrictions of the kind we're applying now on foreign car makers. They did it with a lot of intervention, a lot of hundreds of billions of dollars of state money. Coordination between different levels of government in China, and then, of course, later on, competition among Chinese producers for consumers, right, it was easy to charge their cars and whatnot. I think, to say simply allowing that product, which has been highly subsidized, and the European investigation found probably illegally subsidized under the World Trade Organization rules, to allow that just into the market with no conditions, I think is probably the wrong approach. And I think the unions in Canada and the industry are right to say we can't and we really don't want to compete on those unfair terms. But we do need to think about how do we coordinate, right, with the provinces and the federal government and municipalities to get more charging stations up and to get some better options available for people.
And what about relationships? A statement from the Chinese embassy says, and this is a translation, but, quote, China expresses strong dissatisfaction and firm opposition to this, end quote. How do you think these measures are going to affect Canada's already strained trade relationship with China?
Yeah, you'd probably it's not going to help. On some level, though, China kind of has to make these statements. It really is. It's grappling with this issue of overproduction as well. Like our government said that the Chinese, this is state-sponsored overproduction of electric vehicles. I think that goes too far. That the Chinese government is aware of the problem of overproduction, and that goes for steel, aluminum, and electric vehicles, and is kind of trying to figure out how to deal with it. So it's possible that it's simply going to let this slide, but it will take us to the World Trade Organization. When I say let this slide, I mean it's not going to apply immediate countermeasures to Canadian imports. I think what it will do is it will challenge the measures of the World Trade Organization, and it will do the same for the U.S. measures once they are announced, just as it did for the European measures a few weeks ago. It's taken them to the World Trade Organization. I think that's the route they're going to go, all very above board and let's go through the official channels as it continues to figure out what to do with its own domestic electric vehicle problems.
What are you watching for next? Because these tariffs kick in on October 1st. So between now and then, what are you watching for?
Well, I guess we'll be looking for the consultation the government's going to announce on further steps it's going to take. Again, it didn't mention batteries. It didn't mention battery components, or maybe like the electric drivetrains and other areas where our sectors might need some more protection in the short term. But we should also be looking in the next few months, I think, to U.S. Measures with respect to inward investment of Chinese auto firms into the North American supply chains. That's going to really affect how Canada deals with the same issue, right? Like we know that BYD is thinking of, or mentioning it wants to maybe build a plant in Canada. Does that become impossible? Or does it become more difficult based on these U.S. security measures it's intending to announce? These are important questions. I think we'll have to see what the U.S. does and how Canada responds at that point.
Stuart, thank you for the analysis. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Stuart True is a trade researcher with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. He's a research institute focused on social, economic, and environmental issues. Speaking of this story, more analysis coming up on World Report in 3 minutes. The latest in national and international news on CBC. Right now, let's go to Megan Ketcherson, who's in our news centre with headlines.
Good morning. Well, one downtown Winnipeg restaurant owner says the hybrid work week has cost him a lot of business. Under a new federal policy, civil servants will be required to spend at least 3 days per week in the office starting next month. The owner of the White Star Diner says that's good news. He says his restaurant is only busy on days when workers are downtown. He says he wishes more of them would be in the area 5 days a week. And a traveling Midway may have to tear down its carnival for good because of new federal rules. Wonder Shows has been a staple of Manitoba summer fairs for years. That could be in jeopardy because the federal government is restricting the number of temporary workers it accepts. And I'll have more at 7:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
The commute so far this morning is going okay. Give us a call if you see a problem. 788-3093 is where you can report that. For the forecast, a little chilly. It's 13. It's partly cloudy in Winnipeg. It's calm. In the city today, we're going to head to a high of 20 degrees, and that's as far as we'll get. Mainly cloudy as well for today in Winnipeg before the sun returns tomorrow. And not too bad outside right now. That cloud cover certainly, though, is the case. In the next hour of Information Radio after 7, over 60 years, as we heard in the news from Megan this morning, that traveling carnival has been encouraging Manitobans to add thrill to their lives. Maybe you've been to a Wonder Show, but they are really worried about the foreign temporary workers changes to that, the limit. So we're going to hear more about it. That's after 7 o'clock. In addition, the next hour, from one collection to another, we're going to step into Mike's General Store, a really well-known antique shop in Winnipeg, St. Vital, Old St. Vital neighborhood. We're going to find out how the longtime former antique store has now been transformed into a computer collector's haven. So stay tuned for that community story. And speaking of community stories, we've had a series looking at what is needed in the next chief of police for the city of Winnipeg. We've been asking different stakeholders, former chief as well, that question in full interviews this summer. Today, we turn our attention to one of the decision makers. So stay tuned. We're going to talk to the chair of the Winnipeg Police Board, who's going to weigh in on looking for the next chief of the Winnipeg Police, which is what Marcus Chambers is tasked to do.
Today on The Current.
I'm Susan Ormiston. Tensions over climate change policy leading up to the U.S. election are raising questions. What will happen with green energy incentives if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance take office?
And they say the noise causes cancer. You tell me that one, okay?
That's coming up on The Current.
The Current. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Canada's relationship with the United States is expected to dominate discussions in Halifax today. It's the final day of the Liberal cabinet retreat. The partnership between the two countries has been a key priority for the Trudeau government ahead of this year's American election. Kate McKenna is covering the retreat.
You know, the U.S. and Canada are neighbors. That's true in a geographic sense, obviously, but it's also true in a much deeper sense.
When U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan made a surprise visit to the federal cabinet retreat, he was effusive in his praise.
I just want to take a moment especially to say thank you to the Prime Minister, who has been a tremendous partner to President Biden.
For the final day of the retreat, the focus will shift to U.S.-Canada relations and maintaining that positive relationship. Ambassador Kirsten Hillman is expected to address cabinet, so are two former ambassadors. It's part of the Trudeau government's focus on its Team Canada strategy, a plan to create jobs and increase trade. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly.
We will engage, notwithstanding who is elected in the White House. We've gone through an Obama administration, we've worked with the Trump administration, and we have worked with the Biden administration, and we will be ready when it comes to November.
The strategy is similar to what Canada did after Trump won the 2016 election. Canadian officials traveled through the United States, making the case for continued cooperation between the two countries. Ottawa has already begun talks with members of Donald Trump's circle about avoiding new trade tariffs if he's elected U.S. president this fall. We're expecting to hear an update on how this plan is going sometime today. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Halifax.
China says Canada's decision to put tariffs on electric vehicles made in that country disregards the facts. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced yesterday a 100% surtax on Chinese-made EVs. Lin Jian is a spokesperson for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He says the tariffs undermine the trade relationship between the two countries, and the decision will hurt Canadian companies, consumers, and the global climate response.
China's burgeoning EV industry is the result of persistent tech innovation, well-established industrial and supply chains, and full market competition. This is what happens when our comparative advantages provide exactly what the market needs.
China has not said how it would respond to the Canadian tariffs. They take effect October 1st. People in Ukraine are once again looking to the skies this morning. Russia is launching a second day of drone and missile attacks across the country. Several cities were targeted overnight, including the capital, Kyiv. Local authorities say at least 4 people there were killed. Anna Cunningham is following developments.
In the dark, rescue workers pull one injured person from the rubble of a destroyed hotel in the southern Ukrainian town of Kryvyi Rih. Local officials say the hotel took a direct hit. Throughout the night, air raid sirens rang out in the capital Kyiv and across the country. Ukraine says it shot down 5 missiles and 60 drones.
I think the Russians, from a tactical point of view, are trying to overwhelm Ukrainian air defences.
Professor Michael Clark is the former director of RUSI, the UK-based Royal United Services Institute.
Undoubtedly, this is Putin's attempt to, as it were, regain the narrative to show that this is Russian momentum and that the Russians have got every intention and the capability of making life miserable for the Ukrainians over the winter.
Today's attack has been less heavy than Monday, when Russia launched over 200 drones and missiles. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky repeated calls for Western allies to lift restrictions on the use of Western weapons to strike deep into Russian territory. The Kremlin has said it would respond to Ukraine's incursion into the Kursk region.
Putin doesn't have a lot of options on the table, really.
Peter Dickinson is editor of the Atlantic Council Ukraine's alert service.
He's deployed his entire army almost to Ukraine. The only real option he has is to escalate his air war.
Ukraine's air defence forces are now warning that the entire country is under threat of a ballistic weapons attack. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are scheduled to debate September 10th, at least for now. The two campaigns can't seem to agree over the format of the debate. Steve Futterman joins us now with the details. And Steve, what is this disagreement about?
What we are seeing right now is Donald Trump complaining about ABC being the network that will host the debate, and the Harris campaign saying it wants the microphones on both sides to be on during the entire debate. As for the Trump complaints about ABC, he was upset with some ABC interviews during the weekend, and he hinted yesterday he might demand a change of networks.
I want to do it, but I think it's very unfair. The single worst network for unfairness, I think, worse than CNN, worse than NBC, which is really hard to believe.
As for the microphone dispute, you may recall in that Trump-Biden debate in June, only the microphone of the candidate answering the question was on, the other mic was off. The Harris campaign now feels it would be just fine to let the American people see Trump interrupting and possibly saying something he might regret. This was Trump's reaction to that.
We agreed to the same rules. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I'd rather have it probably on, but the agreement was that it would be the same. The truth is they're trying to get out of it.
So will this debate actually happen?
Well, the pundits think it will. I agree. For Trump or even Harris to back out could have major negative ramifications. The Harris campaign very much wants to debate Trump. It feels the vice president, with her background as a prosecutor, could do very well. And the Trump campaign, well, they right now need to change the momentum that seems to be on Harris's side. A strong performance in the debate could do that, but there is always a risk, as Joe Biden found out in June. What if it doesn't go your way? But again, right now, the debate is set September 10th in Philadelphia.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Marcia.
Steve Futterman in Los Angeles. Ontario and Quebec provincial police have issued an Amber Alert. They are looking for a 5-year-old boy named Shi Gao Getty. Police say he was abducted last night in Brossard on Montreal's South Shore. Officers say the boy may be inside a white 2024 Model 3 Tesla with an Ontario license plate. The suspect is a 65-year-old woman named Yang Rei Shui. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward. A massive hydroelectric project in northeastern British Columbia has begun filling its reservoir. Site C Dam has faced decades of opposition, but proponents of the project say the dam will provide green energy to the province, and now it's almost complete. Hannah Peterson has more.
As the Peace River Valley slowly floods, opponents of the Site C mega project are watching. It will take up to 4 months to fill the 83-kilometer-long reservoir. The $16 billion controversial dam project started construction in 2015. It has drawn vocal opposition from landowners, First Nations communities, and environmental groups. Greg Alexis is the manager of public affairs for the Site C project.
Well, we acknowledge there's been challenges on the project, and there's people out there who have differing views. However, once it's complete, we're going to have a project here that's going to produce clean and reliable electricity.
Esther Peterson owns a ranch above the reservoir. She says the dam has devalued her land and the future of her property is uncertain because the ground underneath is not stable.
So we have to, make a decision if we're going to stay in the house or, and if we have to move it.
Gwen Johansson is the former mayor of Hudson's Hope, a nearby community. She vocally opposed the dam and was forced to sell a portion of her property.
We made the arguments and we did what we could and we lost the fight.
BC Hydro says Site C will increase the province's overall power supply by about 8%. The Crown Corporation says it will provide enough electricity to reliably power nearly 500,000 homes. Hannah Peterson, CBC News, Prince George.
It's definitely happening. After 15 years, without one of the biggest names in Britpop, Oasis is reuniting.
Need a little time to wake up. Need a little time to rest your mind. You know you should, so I guess you might as well.
Brothers and co-founding members Liam and Noel Gallagher have apparently put aside their differences. They announced this morning 14 concert dates in the UK and Ireland for summer 2025. They include 4 nights at London's Wembley Stadium and 4 in their hometown of Manchester. Plans are also in the works for the band to tour outside Europe. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Welcome to the Tuesday Morning Show, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. 12 degrees in the city right now. And maybe we'll see a little sun. You can see kind of a shelf of it underneath the clouds this morning, but it's not going to get super warm. Forecast in a moment. This hour on the program, we continue a series that we've been running all summer long for the last 5 weeks at least. We've been asking different stakeholders in the community what qualities are needed in the next chief of police for the city of Winnipeg. As Danny Smythe, the current chief, prepares to officially retire, heard the date's coming up next week already. Today we turn our attention to the decision makers. So the chair of the Winnipeg Police Board, the board will choose the next chief. We'll talk about consultations that they've had with community members and also what they're looking for in the next chief of police. So stay tuned. That's coming up at 10 to 8. In addition to a bit of a lighter story here, at 7:40, our community reporter was out and about and has been in St. Vital, to a place that was part of the St. Vital landscape for more than 40 years. Shanley Vidal visited Mike's General Store, which closed its doors last November. But the former antique shop has now been transformed into a podcast studio and more. So we'll hear more about that. Right now, let's go to Megan Ketcherson, who's in with other developing news.
Well, good morning. New restrictions on temporary foreign workers could hurt Manitoba summer fairs in a big way. Wonder Shows relies heavily on temporary foreign workers. But if the feds cut that back, it could prevent Wonder Shows from operating next year. The owner says about half of his workers are temporary foreign workers from Jamaica, and he says the foreign help is needed because no one else is applying to work with him. And residents in southeast Winnipeg may soon have a new rec facility. The city has put out a request for a feasibility study on the Bona Vista Recreation Centre. Now, plans for this recplex go as far back as 2009, and St. Vital Councillor Brian Mays says the community needs a new facility to serve its growing population of more than 10,000 people. And we'll have more at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Abby Adeyemi is back from a well-deserved week off. Hi, Abby.
Hi, Mars. I guess I brought the cool temperature today.
Yeah, you came back right when we're shifting into a different phase here.
I know, and that's the condition across board. We're getting more of that partly cloudy condition across the province today. Currently, Winnipeg at 12. It's going to be mainly cloudy today. We're heading for a high of 20. And tonight, we'll see these cloudy conditions clear off during the evening period, and then we cool down to around 9 degrees. And a peak into tomorrow, we will be warming up. We'll start off sunny, and then we're aiming for a high of 26, though it's going to feel hotter than that. The humidity factor will creep in tomorrow. Other regions, it's simply the same this morning. Cloudy skies, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing temperatures between, we're going to see highs between 17 and 22. Up north, though, we're seeing sunny conditions already in Thompson and Churchill, but Thompson is still like stuck on 0 for now, so it's like around that very, very cooling spot. And Churchill is at 9 degrees. And then down south, it's all partly conditions around 9 and 11 degrees, except for Dauphin, that is seeing the sunny start at this time. Dauphin is at 7 and sunny, and then it will be warming up to a high of 23. I think Dauphin it's going to be like the only part of the province that would get to 23. The other regions would be hovering between 17 and 20.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Maybe not a beach day. All right, let's get to the commuting news with Chloe Freezing. Morning again.
Good morning. Commuter line is still quiet out there. Checking out some maps, also looking pretty good. But if something does happen to get in your way, I would love to hear about it. I mean, I wouldn't love to hear about what's slowing you down because that's disappointing, but I would love to share that information with your fellow commuters. You can call us at 204-788-3093.
Well, as Megan was just mentioning, for over 60 years, Wonder Shows has been encouraging thrill seekers to step right up. The traveling carnival has been a staple at many Manitoba summer fairs, but local owner Ken Kernicki does fear that policy change from the federal government. He says it could force him to close its doors, the business to close its doors forever. Yesterday, Ottawa announcing the plan to cut back on how many temporary foreign workers that it lets into the country. And Ken says that Wonder Shows started relying on foreign workers in 2019. Every year he increases the number of workers by 5, in fact, and he was hoping to hire 30 people next year. To talk more deeply about his concerns, he met with CBC's Ian Fraze.
It's always been a struggle finding people that want to travel and do this kind of job. It's not an easy job, a lot of long hours. We didn't know what to do already, and I started talking to some friends of mine that are in Ontario, BC, in the same business, and they were bringing in the foreign help, and you know, they had basically the same attitude where if they didn't have them, they were going to try it, and if it didn't work, it almost would put us out of business. So I decided to try it. And it's working. It's working, yeah.
You said it was always hard. Did it get harder?
It was getting harder. Absolutely.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. It just seems that everybody's struggling in any industry that they're having a hard time finding people to work, and I would say probably our business would be probably the toughest to find somebody to work, because they have to travel with us, and they're away from home, and not everybody's willing to leave their families behind. And we seem to be a big family when our show gets together. It's people that we create our own family.
Yeah. Because you have to be gone for every weekend of the summer.
Absolutely, basically. Yeah. We have sleeping quarters, bunkhouses for all our guys, so they all travel from location to location. They have to accept that way of life.
And it's gone well.
It's gone well.
How has it gone well?
Well, we're bringing in guys in from Jamaica. They know what the deal is. They're here for 4 months. They're hard workers. They enjoy coming here for 4 months. They're here to save some money and have a little bit of a better life, back home. And they come here, they enjoy coming here, and they enjoy going back to their families, but they know what the deal is.
So now the federal government announcing that they will rein in the number of temporary foreign workers. They say there'll be exceptions for like healthcare and construction and food. When you hear that news, what's your reaction?
Well, you know what, at the beginning, I never thought of anything of that sort, but I am totally relied on the government's decision here. Their decision, basically, if I don't get them, I'm going to shut my doors, because I just can't find people to work. I mean, we advertise, nobody's coming looking for this kind of job. It's been tough our whole life, and it seems to be tougher now even. We play from the end of April to the end of August, and I would say we haven't even had one person come to the show office and say, hey, I want a job. And back in the day when I was a young guy, there was 15-year-olds, and we did that kind of stuff, but you don't see that anymore.
You're saying not even one person has come and been like, do you have a job?
Yeah, and on our trucks, a lot of our trucks will have, we're hiring, and we don't get any applicants. So, we have to go through the process. We go through the process, and, obviously, we fall in the category to be able to get the foreign help, and it's worked. It's been great, but if we didn't have it, I would definitely fold my doors. People just don't realize what it takes to move a carnival. We have to set it up. We have to move it. We have to operate it, and then we got to tear it down. And there's a lot of long hours. And you need good physical help that's willing to do that, and they're there to make some money. So we just finished Morning Corn and Apple Festival, Gimli Icelandic Festival. The communities love it. It's a lot of fun, and it took a while to get to where we are, and I hope we can keep going.
What would it mean to these communities if you're not around?
Well, if we're not around, I guess they're not going to have amusement rides. There would be a void, absolutely.
You've done this every summer for a real long time.
Yeah.
What would it mean to you?
Well, it'd be sad. It's a good feeling to provide, employment to people. I mean, if you can't do it, you can't do it.
If you could tell the federal government what they should do with temporary farm workers, they want to rein it down, what would you tell them?
Well, we definitely need them to stay in business. Otherwise, we won't be in business. It's just, we've tried every avenue before we went to this, and it's been very difficult.
Ken Kernicki there, the owner of Wonder Shows here in Manitoba, in conversation with CBC's Ian Fraze. Now, Ottawa specifically plans to refuse applications for low-wage workers in the areas of the country with an unemployment rate of at least 6% in most sectors. So it is currently unclear what the federal government considers low wage, or if any parts of Manitoba may be impacted, as we try to get more information on this story. What we do know can be found at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Hearts will race. Champions will emerge.
The Canadian is a champion.
Medals will shine. The best of the best are set to compete for Paralympic glory. Experience the extraordinary with extended live event coverage and full event replays. The 2024 Paralympics begin August 28th, live from Paris. Watch free on CBC Gem.
12 degrees in common Winnipeg this morning. We have a partly cloudy sky in downtown Winnipeg. More cloud than anything else right now. A high of 20 degrees is what we are expecting. Brandon, mainly clear, 9, and Thompson is sitting right at 0 right now. Well, an interesting conversation coming up on Unreserved later today here on the radio. When it comes to Indigenous communities, food is more than just something to eat. Dale Windrant-Morrow, in her eyes, it's about tradition, culture, collaboration, and overall wellness, something that colonization tried to eradicate. Morrow believes that by decolonizing their diets, Indigenous people can restore wellness to communities. And she's been working to decolonize diets for more than a decade. She wants to see what she calls, quote, nation-specific eating, and that's based on the uniqueness of land, culture, and tradition. Morrow is Haudenosaunee dietitian and chair of the Aboriginal Nutrition Network of Dietitians of Canada. She lives and works in her home community of 6 nations of the Grand River. And she spoke to Unreserved host Rosanna Deerchild about the impacts of her work so far. Here's a bit of a preview.
I think the work that I did in Northern Ontario with the Pikangikum First Nation, the student nutrition program there had gotten Ontario Trillium grant. And really how that started was I had a colleague that saw me speak in Thunder Bay, and she was from Breakfast Clubs of Canada that supply a lot of the northern schools with either their food packages or sometimes it's like money for food to purchase from like the northern stores, etc. But what she wanted to do, from what she heard me say, was look at how they could kind of change up the requirements in a way that would be more friendly to Pikangikum and the money that Breakfast Clubs was providing for their food. So we did a whole event up there where we worked with a lot of the amazing women that just come in there from the community, and they cook. They cook for 700 people. 2 times a day, they're providing a breakfast. They're making snacks, and then they're doing their lunch, and then having the women have their say of what they like to cook and what they didn't want to cook, because some things were foreign to them. So those were great communication and collaboration that I saw between the organization and the people there actually doing the work. And then they got that Trillium grant, and then the recommendation was to bring more traditional foods on their nutrition plan, which was beautiful. And to think about like the reach that if they're feeding 700 people, because like I said, it wasn't just the kids, the teachers were eating there because they're flying communities. You're there, right? There's nowhere else to go. People would come there and eat those meals every day. And now they had these traditional foods that were welcomed. And the other part of that too, which to make it sustainable and impactful from the funders' perspective was that the Ontario Trillium Foundation allowed me to be able to create an Indigenous focused lens to how that program would be evaluated to ensure it had the full effect of what those foods meant to us evaluated, as well as the sustainability of the use of those foods. That was one of the most impactful ones for me.
That is Deo Widrant Morrow, who is a Haudenosaunee dietitian and the chair of the Aboriginal Nutrition Network of Dietitians of Canada. And to hear the full conversation, tune in to Unreserved today. She's a guest on this week's episode with host Rosanna Deerchild. And that airs today at 1 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. But of course, you can go anytime and listen on the CBC Listen app. It is 7:25 on the nose, and that means it's time for morning sports on the morning show with Paul McGowan. Good morning.
Hi, Marcy.
So let's start with baseball. The Blue Jays, they won both games against the Red Sox yesterday.
They did. They won the makeup game from June and then won game number 2 later in the evening. Now, as you probably know, history was made in that first game. Danny Jansen started it for the Blue Jays back in June. He finishes it as a member of the Red Sox. The truth is that it was better trivia than television. They did talk about it on the broadcast at Fenway Park. They did list Danny Jansen as a member of the Blue Jays before that first game. But for the most part, it was business as usual. Jays manager John Schneider, though, did say post-game that it was fitting that this happened to Danny Jansen.
I think it's cool for him to kind of go down in the record books as the first player to do that. Glad that he ended the game right there. You didn't want Cassis to come up as a tying run. I've known Jano forever, and something cool that he can always kind of say he was the first at, and he's good at weird stuff. So pretty cool for him.
The natural follow-up that nobody asked is, what weird stuff is Danny Jansen good at? Like, does he make balloon animals? I'm so curious. It creates so much mystery, and we don't have any answers. The Blue Jays, though, now have 6 wins in a row, and they'll look to make it 7 tonight as they continue that series with the Red Sox.
What weird stuff are you good at?
Oh, man.
Right?
I don't know if I'm good at anything.
It's a good
estimating the
question.
right amount of... Yeah, actually. Like, it's
Okay.
like what weird thing would be your Olympic sport is kind of the natural...
I can move my left ear. Is that a big deal anymore?
Really? I don't
Yeah.
know. I can correctly estimate how much butter I need for my popcorn.
See, I'm trying
that's
to-
about...
That's all we got this morning. And
Yeah.
the dynamic radio of moving your ear. Let's move on here to continue with sports. So let's go to tennis this morning, Paul. A bunch of Canadians are going to be on court in day 2 here, right?
Including, Leylah Fernandez, who had that magical run to the U.S. Open final back in 2021. She's been playing good tennis recently. She reached the singles quarterfinal at the Cincinnati Open, also went to the doubles final there. But recent success notwithstanding, Fernandez's coach, Father Jorge Hernandez, said that Leylah's been looking to the past for inspiration.
We've been watching matches of hers from the 2021 almost every day leading up to our first round, showing her what her smile was all about, showing her joy for being there on the big stage, the passion that she had for those brief 2 weeks, and reminding her of the reasons why we love this. Because sometimes it gets to be a little bit cluttered, if you will, in the head.
That's Jorge Fernandez talking to TSN. Now, Leylah takes the court this afternoon. 4 other Canadians playing first-round matches as well. That includes U.S. Open qualifier Gabriel Diallo getting a shot. Also, Olympic bronze medalist Felix Auger-Aliassime.
Finally, we are now 1 day away from the opening of the Paralympic Games, right?
Yeah, we are so close to actual competition from Paris. But first, of course, we have the usual pomp and circumstance to get through. Let's start with the circumstance. Now, after an Olympics that's a gender parity among athletes for the first time ever, these Paralympics are not quite equal, but they come close to parity. Here's Craig Spence of the International Paralympic Committee.
We have 1,983 female athletes, which is a record for us. It ensures we're at 45% for the Games. I think that's a tremendous achievement, bearing in mind our first Games were in 1960. So to almost achieve gender parity in such a short time frame is really encouraging.
I mean, gender parity isn't really a number of years thing, but I guess we'll let the IPC pat themselves on the back. Anyway, now the opening ceremony tomorrow night will see athletes outside of the Champs-Élysées. And if you thought the Olympic opening ceremony was extravagant and self-indulgent, creative director Thomas Joly said about the Paralympic opening, quote, "When we cut off the heads of the king and queen here, it changed society once. Maybe this ceremony will be the second time we change society."
Wow.
That is a guy who knows how to sell, right? I mean, I don't think anyone's going to lose their heads tomorrow night, but I also don't know that for sure. Credit to Thomas Joly. I am watching the Paralympic opening ceremony tomorrow night.
All right, Paul, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
I think a lot of people will. That is Paul McGowan with Morning Sports. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Your commute this morning in Winnipeg and around Manitoba going pretty well. The commuter line's been pretty quiet, but call Chloe if you have any issue out there. We can pass it along. 788-3093. Still ahead on the morning show. It has been part of the St. Vital landscape for more than 40 years. The colorful Mike's General Store at the corner of Maget and St. Anne's, covered in signs with the old gas pump out front, really recognizable, but it closed last November. However, it's been transformed now from an antique shop into a podcast studio. We're going to hear all about that with our community reporter right after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg at 7:30, partly cloudy and 9. Another cooler day today, mainly cloudy and a high of 20. A downtown Winnipeg restaurant owner says business will never be the same because of the hybrid work week. Under a new federal policy, civil servants will be required to spend at least 3 days a week in the office. Bruce Smets at the White Star Diner says that will help. His restaurant is only busy on days when workers are downtown. Smets is not a fan of the hybrid work week.
I get the appeal for them, but just go to work. Go to work, get in your car and go to work. It's the complaint of I don't want to deal with traffic and I don't want to deal with the people, etc. It's part of life.
The federal rules for a hybrid work week start next month. Manitoba Hydro and MPI have both moved to hybrid work weeks. Neither has any plans to expand to full-time office work for employees. Winnipeg police are investigating a car pedestrian crash that sent one woman to hospital. Police say it happened last night around 9:30 on McPhillip Street near McCrae. The driver did stay on the scene. The woman was taken to hospital in critical condition. New restrictions on temporary foreign workers could hurt Manitoba's summer fairs in a big way. Wonder Shows is a midway that pops up at various fairs across the province. The business relies heavily on temporary foreign workers, but if the feds cut that back, it could prevent Wonder Shows from operating next year. Ken Kernicki is the owner. He says foreign help is needed because he's exhausted every other avenue.
I haven't even had one person come to the show office and say, hey, I want a job. You know, and then back in the day when I was a young guy, I mean, there was 15-year-olds and, I mean, we did that kind of stuff, but you don't see that anymore.
The feds are planning to refuse temporary foreign worker applications for low-wage staff in areas of high unemployment. It's unclear at this point if Wonder Shows will be effective. There, starting wages around $16 an hour, but workers earn time and a half for working more than 40 hours a week. In international news, the United Nations has announced it is pursuing the movement of humanitarian aid within Gaza. The decision comes as a new Israeli evacuation order has been issued for an area that has become a hub for aid workers. Sasha Pestrusek has more from Jerusalem.
90% of Gaza's population has been displaced. Now, more than 250,000 have been told to move again, ordered out of Deir al-Bala in the south so that Israeli military operations can continue. Israel says Hamas fighters are hiding there. NGOs like Doctors Without Borders are considering pulling out. UN work is at a standstill. Louise Wateridge is with UNRWA, the main organization helping Palestinians.
The humanitarian operations are just shrinking because of these displacement orders. So lives are being lost, people not receiving aid. It's just a complete disaster for us trying to do our jobs on the ground here.
That's not likely to change soon, as Israel plans continued operations throughout the south. Sasha Petrusek, CBC News, Jerusalem.
In Winnipeg, a city councillor is pleased to see plans for a new rec centre in southeast Winnipeg moving forward. St. Vital councillor Brian Mays says they are at the Sage Creek and Bonavista neighbourhoods are growing. The city has talked about a new rec centre since about 2009. It's looking at a contractor to conduct a feasibility study. Mays says the area lacks amenities.
I'm trying to start with the rec center and then move on to the library somewhere in Sage Creek. But for this term of office, really my number one priority for the ward was to get this going, get a shovel in the ground by 26. So hopefully we can get some coordination with the other levels of government too.
The city has budgeted $5 million for the project, which Mays expects to cost around $15 million in total. He hopes construction will begin in 2026. And the mystery of who was operating a drone that got up close and personal with Arkel's lead singer Max Kerman in Winnipeg is on its way to being solved. It happened Friday night at the Burt Block Party. Kerman took to social media to talk about the drone.
And I figured I just missed the memo that the festival was operating a drone. All good. Throughout the show, I sort of developed a relationship with the drone, and I'd signal it to come closer, and then I'd sort of push it away.
It turns out it was an illegal drone, and police found the operator and issued him a warning. Kerman put out a message on social media that he would love the footage, and yesterday the mystery drone operator reached out to the band.
Yeah, the police did come and check me out, but they were two very nice gentlemen. They just came and asked me if I had a permit for it, and they looked at my shots. They loved it, and they told me I should come work for the police force.
The mystery drone operator says he wants to clean up the footage and get it to the band. Winnipeg police say you're not allowed to operate a drone over outdoor events without a permit. And that's the CBC News for Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
It is 7:35 a.m. If you want to find more on any of the stories, as Megan mentioned, that were in the news today, you can always check our website or socials. By the way, on socials this morning, I asked what your Manitoba moment of the summer has been so far. There's still some summer left. However, we're getting some beautiful photos in. So after 8 o'clock, we're going to share some of those on our YouTube stream. And if you want to get more in, you can write to us on our Facebook page, which is my page, Marcy Marcusa. And during the show, we take comments and photos there. Let's get into the weather for today. It won't feel a lot like summer. It's actually going to be a bit cool, Abby.
No, that's you're right, Marcy. That's the condition across board. Most regions will see mostly cloudy skies today, with temperatures ranging from 17 to 23 degrees. Some breezy conditions expected in some areas, and then we'll clear off. Cloudy conditions will be clearing off tonight, and we'll see the temperatures dropping to around 6 and 10 degrees. Winnipeg at 13 and cloudy at this time. We're heading to a high of 20. Brandon is at 9 degrees, partly cloudy also at this time. More clouds will roll in this morning. That would clear by the afternoon period, and then you see the temperatures climbing to around 21. Up north, Thompson is currently still enjoying some sunny conditions, though it's kind of chilly out there because it's 0 at this time. We're expecting the sunny sky to transition into a mix of sun and clouds, and then you will warm up to 20. Further north in Churchill, it is also sunny at 8 degrees. Some sunshine will definitely come. Then some clouds will develop this afternoon. We'll see highs near 17 degrees. Dauphin is sunny at 7 degrees. You get more of this sunny weather today, and you'll be warming up to 23. Though with the humidex factored in, you will feel like 25 out there. Gimli is partly cloudy at 11 for the Interlake region today. Expect this mainly cloudy conditions to stay with you all day. You warm up to 20. Same conditions for Steinbach, partly cloudy, 11, heading to a high of 20. Similar conditions for Morris, but Morris is at 10 degrees, also heading to a high of 20. Most of the regions, like the north, would see partly cloudy conditions tonight. Then that would clear overnight, bringing the temps down to 6 degrees. And for the southern regions, we're going to be expecting some clear skies tonight. Then we cool off to 9 degrees. And tomorrow we're going to see some sunny conditions, and the humidity will be returning. But right now, let's just enjoy some cool air. It is 12 in Winnipeg.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi back in his regular post with the weather forecast. Okay, let's get to traffic and the commute with Chloe.
Hello. I got a call on the commuter line from Julie, who says it's really slow moving on Donald Street heading southbound. This has been an issue for a couple days here. Donald southbound at Broadway specifically, you're losing your 2 left lanes due to construction. And so far, things are backed up just a couple of blocks, but it was really slowing down when Julie called. So if you're heading southbound on Donald, just around Broadway, prepare to lose 2 lanes and to experience some pretty slow traffic. Thank you, Julie, for that call. If there is anything else getting in your way, you can give us a call at 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Chloe. Well, next on the show, after more than 40 years, the antiques at Mike's General Store have been mostly moved out. Owner Mike Hewen says he closed the recognizable St. Vital shop last November. As you might recognize this place, though, still every inch of the outside of the building on St. Anne's and Manger has long been covered with colorful signs and paintings, the old gas pump at the door. But the space, despite being closed last November, has new life now, still with a vintage vibe. Mike's son Dan has moved his collection of more than 200 computers into the space. Dan and his brother now use the old shop as a studio for their YouTube videos. And a few remnants of Mike's General Store are still there too. CBC Manitoba's community reporter Shanley Vidal met up with the father and son to get the tour of the new space.
When we closed the shop, I put up for sale, and there just wasn't enough bites at it, at even the money I'd paid for it 35, 40 years ago. So I said to the boys, "You want it?" I said, "Oh, can we have it, Dad?"
So my pop had a cash register from the early 1900s. I mean, we still kept that in here. So there's a little bit of the old school vibe still. We're using it for like parts and tool storage and things like that. So it fits the space really well.
Tell me about making the YouTube videos.
Canadian Computer Collector was another project that I started during the pandemic. The very first video I made was how to sanitize a G4 iMac. I'd gone back to college, started working in the corporate world, and I finally was not, totally broke all the time, but I felt like something was missing. And when I was doing stand-up and all that, I felt like I was having a really great time, but I could never pay my bills. So I needed to find something kind of in between that would be satisfying and I could have an outlet for being, goofy and weird. It used to just be I would start my cell phone running and I would just take something apart and get some B-roll and then put it together afterward. Now we're doing scripts and we do voiceover and we have proper equipment for it all.
What does it feel to be in this transformed space that you remember so well as a kid?
This place used to be filled to the brim with antiques from numerous different generations. Our dad's been in this space for over 40 years and we grew up in the halls of the antique shop. I remember as a kid, there was like an old toy car once that I cut my finger on and, we put a Band-Aid on the car and then myself. And, these are just like really young childhood memories that I have in this place. And it feels so cool to kind of come back and be able to have my collection in here.
I was really concerned when Danny started buying all these computers. I go, what the heck are you going to do with them? And it didn't take very long for me to realize that, the same way I have nostalgia for maybe Yogi Bear or Archie and his friends or the Hot Wheels I grew up with, they have nostalgia for all these old computers. You're 12, 14 years old. I mean, you're dreaming of that great computer that you can game on.
I started watching a lot of documentaries about the birth of computing and sort of the beginning of the internet, because these were really large milestones, I feel, for someone who's a millennial, and I didn't feel like I knew the story well enough. And then as I watched the videos, I started thinking, I wonder how much those cost, because that looked pretty cool. I'd never seen one that looked like that. Some of these really old computers look like E.T. or, something out of Star Trek. And what I learned quickly is that they used to be considered garbage. So people would throw these things out. And then eventually they started saying, like, can I get like $20 or $50 for this? And I thought, maybe I should slide in here while it's still cheap to free, if prices are starting to go up. And so I ended up grabbing as much as I could. When the pandemic hit, I think I had maybe 5 computers that were outside of my regular one. And then by the end of the pandemic, I had like 150 or something. So over here this is really cool. So this is what you would consider an early laptop. If I can remember which way the buttons press. So this is the SX64. So this would be considered highly portable back in the day. And this is essentially a Commodore 64 built into what they called luggables. And a luggable meant it had a handle, you could haul it with you, but it wasn't totally portable because it was so heavy, so they lugged them. Seeing stuff like this in the wild, I just go, oh man, like I have to have that. I need like at least one to take apart and have a look at.
So this desk might be familiar to people who came into Mike's General Store.
Yeah, actually this desk used to have all these extra parts attached to it. There was like a wood frame that went up like this, and all the stereo equipment for the shop was up there. And so according to my dad, this thing came from a place called Mother's Pizza in Garden City. What we'd love to do is we put a green screen behind it, My brother and I are probably going to do some podcasts or do some weird stuff. Like, we used to love when Conan O'Brien would take his desk out for a drive, and so we'll probably do something like that too.
Luckily, all the wood that created the shelves in the store we took down and repurposed.
He really made good use of the space. Like, every single square inch of this place was used to display something that was for sale. So now we're trying to do our best to find like a happy medium. We don't want stuff to encroach too much on the openness of it. It's great in that we get to be around our dad all the time. We get to hang out in a place that we spend so much time in as kids. And I get to do what I love, which is pulling computers apart and putting them back together as best as I can. It's not always success. Sometimes you finish one, you got like 4 screws left over, and you go, wonder what those were from. But, you know, we try our best.
That was Dan Hewen and his dad, Mike Hewen, speaking with CBC community reporter Shanley Vidal. You can follow, by the way, Dan on YouTube at Canadian Computer Collector, and you would have seen a video of that story as well inside the store and seen everything that Shanley was talking about there with Dan and Mike if you're watching our YouTube feed this morning, and we hope you are. The show's live on YouTube each and every morning. 12 degrees in Winnipeg this morning, a high of 20. Still ahead after 8 o'clock on the show. Back to school's around the corner. We're going to talk about how to help your young ones with back to school jitters, anxiety, but also maybe some of the stress of not being allowed to have cell phones in the classroom at certain ages. That'll be a change for people. So what's that? How's that playing out in your own life in house? So stay tuned after 8 o'clock. We're going to have a story all about that. Also, still ahead in this half hour of the program, Marcus Chambers will join us via Zoom. We're talking about the search for the next police chief, which is underway because Danny Smythe next week, September 3rd, is the official date that he will be retiring. So September 2nd, rather, is the official date he'll be retiring. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about what the board has heard so far in consultation with the community. And we've had a summer series looking at what is needed as we move forward. Right now, though, if you were listening to national and international news, Oasis making news this morning, the Brit pop duo, the brothers, known for a lot of timeless hits. They're reuniting for a tour next summer that ends a 15-year hiatus, and presumably the long-held feud between brothers Liam and Noel Gallagher might be over, unless they take it to a stage near you and walk out during a concert. The band is scheduled to play 14 dates in Wales, England, Scotland, and Ireland. That coming officially from Oasis today. Anyways, here's Wonderwall.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you. By now you should have somehow realized what you gotta do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. Backbeat, the word is on the street that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but you never really had a doubt. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. And all the roads we have to walk are winding, and all the lights that lead us there are blinding. There are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how. Because maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my Today was gonna be the day, but they'll never throw it back to you. By now you should have somehow realized what you're not to do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. And all the roads that lead you there were winding, and all
11 minutes to 8 o'clock. Oasis fading into the background there, but not for long. They're going to be on stage once again, reuniting. So that news is coming as big news around the world. The brothers, of course, feuding for years, breaking up for years. It's been 15 years since Oasis was putting on shows, but they will be back. Wonderwall. That tune dates to 1995. Hard to believe. It's an oldie but a goodie. I like it anyway. 10 to 8 is the time right now on 89.3. You're on CBC. Let's return to more serious matters here. The search is on. Next week, Danny Smythe officially retires as Winnipeg Police Chief. But who's going to replace him? And what qualities does the next Chief of Police need to have to get the job done? Every Tuesday for the last 5 weeks, we've heard from a different member of our community. We've heard from people that run crime and Facebook groups online. We've heard from representatives of the MMIWG movement, which is so critical, of course, in community. We've also heard from former police chief Devon Clunas on these questions. So we've had a different member on weighing in on the qualities that are needed in a next chief in this moment in Winnipeg. Today, we are chatting with one of the decision makers. Winnipeg Police Board Chair Marcus Chambers joins us via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. So you've obviously been busy. I understand you've already had consultations leading up to this. Can you just, for the listeners, briefly, Marcus, explain the process that you've been through in choosing a new chief?
Well, there is a lot to unpack here, and it all started back earlier in the year, I would say around March, when the board got together and came up with a request for proposal, which was awarded to M&P as the consulting company to assist the board in the recruitment of the new chief. That process included establishing a timeline that we were going to use to hold consultations, and then put out our job description, and then receive candidates, which ends on September 6th, and then go through a screening process to shortlist potential candidates, and then hopefully have a body in the seat by third week of October in terms of a recommendation to council, which would be ratified sometime in November.
Got it. So third week of October, we may know who the new chief is going to be based on your timeline's goals.
Well, yeah, that'll be the board's recommendation to council.
As part of the process, the board consulted, as I mentioned, members of different communities. What were some of the recurring themes that came up in those consultations around the qualities Winnipeggers are looking for in the next chief and the concerns that they have?
Well, if I can distill it down to, I guess, one theme, it's relationship. A lot of the community that we consulted, and that included Indigenous, newcomer communities, business communities. We consulted with council. Everybody, I guess to a point, had mentioned relationship. The person has to be able to build relationships. They need to be a listener. They need to be empathic. They want somebody that can communicate effectively internally and externally, is a collaborator, and embraces innovation. These are all some of the features that we've heard through and through during our consultation process.
One of the guests in our series, a lot of the themes you're talking about came up in our series as well, especially the trust piece, the relationship building. Former Chief Devon Clunas actually said that the relationship piece is so important right now that he thinks the next chief should be out each and every day, visible with community. It's very important. But one of the guests we also had said that it's time for an Indigenous police chief. What's your response specifically to that and to the other things that have come up in our series here?
Well, Winnipeg is home to the largest population of Indigenous persons per capita. And, in terms of the Truth and Reconciliation and the calls to action, there's something called UNDRIP, which is the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, that we're hoping will be adopted here. There's the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and Jordan's Principle. These are all factors that the next chief will have to work with Indigenous leaders and Indigenous communities to ensure that the needs of Indigenous community is met. So that relationship is critically important to our community.
We know from talking to Devon Clunas as well that the next chief actually doesn't have to be a police officer. You could hire a civilian, someone from outside the service. How likely is that or not in Winnipeg in this moment?
Well, And great question. I mean, the RCMP have done that in terms of hiring a civilian member to run their organization. It was met with limited success. We have to look at somebody that is, the Canadian Police Knowledge Network defines what the core competency should be. And, having experience in police leadership is among that. But to say that we're going to hire an outside person that has no policing experience, I think would be a bit of a stretch. But we have to wait and see what we get in terms of the candidates that are applying. We also have to remember that there's a lot of new executives. This is a transformational period for the city and province. The city is hiring a new CEO. That's on the way. We've recently hired a new CFO, Chief Financial Officer. There's a new chief in Brandon. That will impact on the Manitoba Association of Chiefs of Police. There's a new CACP president, the Canadian Association of Police Chiefs. And so nationally, he'll have to work with that organization as well. And then we have a provincial government that's in the first year of its mandating, that he will have to establish those relationships as well. So a lot of newness in terms of that role and the relationships that he'll have to bring. So to Devon Clunis's point, yes, relationships is a big factor in the recruitment of the next chief.
And just last, obviously it won't be the last time we talk about this, but just last for this morning, I want to ask you about what outgoing Chief Danny Smythe had to say to your board and also to council. He said, he really made a point of saying more officers are needed. He said there's 1,450 sworn officers in 2016 when he came in, and now that number's down to around 1,375 at a time when, as you said, retail theft is up, all kinds of different crimes are calls for service have changed now in community, and there's a bigger need for officers in his view. Can whoever takes this new job expect that might be something that is going to be looked at?
Well, we have to have that discussion. I mean, we have individuals, including academics, that have been very critical of police and very critical of police budgets growing. So we have to work with those members of the community as well, and recognize that we have to come to an understanding in terms of what is needed in terms of community safety, and whether that's more police, whether that's additional programs that help those that are chronically, in trouble with the law or have other issues that police are responding to. Those are some of the tasks and responsibilities that the new chief is going to have to undertake. And again, build those relationships, build that trust, build that understanding that, police cannot do it alone. There is a requirement to engage other members of our community, other segments of our community, to overcome what we're seeing now and restore public order in our city and in our province.
Marcus Chambers, I said that was the last question, but why don't you leave us with the top quality that you would name that we need for the next chief?
Again, for me, it's somebody who is approachable, somebody that we can establish trust, somebody that's transparent and can be held accountable.
Thank you for your time this morning. Always appreciate it.
Thank you, Marcy. Good seeing you today.
You as well. Marcus Chambers on Zoom today, chair of the Winnipeg Police Board. They will make the decision about who Winnipeg's next police chief will be. Danny Smythe next week officially retires. 2 minutes to 8. Megan Ketcherson back with headlines.
Well, a downtown Winnipeg restaurant owner says business will never be the same because of the hybrid work week. Under new federal policies that starts next month, civil servants will be required to spend at least 3 days a week in the office. The owner of the White Star Diner says that will help, but it's not ideal. And a city councillor is pleased to see plans for a new rec centre in southeast Winnipeg moving forward. St. Vital councillor Brian Mays says the Sage Creek and Bonavista neighbourhoods are growing, and the city has been talking about a rec centre there since 2009. And well, more at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Commute going well. 12 degrees in the city of Winnipeg on a cooler Tuesday morning than we've had of late. A high of 20. Well, school goes back. Students go back to school next week, rather, and some of them will not have tech in hand as the cell phone bans begin across the province. How much anxiety will that cause?
Today on Q.
I'm Talia Schlanger sitting in for Tom Power. The last time Sheryl Crow was on the show, she said she was probably done making records. She'll tell you how thinking about the dangers of artificial intelligence motivated her to get back into the studio making new music.
Q. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Susan Ormiston. Tensions over climate change policy leading up to the U.S. election are raising questions. What will happen with green energy incentives if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance take office? That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Beijing says it is strongly dissatisfied with Canada's new tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the 100% surtax on those EVs at the Liberal cabinet retreat yesterday. For now, China is just talking, but a larger response is expected. Freelance reporter Laura Westbrook has more from Hong Kong.
Friends from the media, good afternoon.
Behind the warm words, a frosty response by Beijing, following the announcement by Canada that it would impose a 100% surtax on electric vehicles and 25% levies on aluminium and steel in October. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Li Jiang had this to say.
I want to stress that Canada's actions are in disregard of facts. They ignore WTO rules and run counter to historical trends. This is typical act of trade protectionism.
Chinese car brands are still not a common sight in Canada, but some, like BYD, have taken steps to enter the country's market. Canada's move follows similar ones by the US and the EU to impose high tariffs on Chinese EVs. Governments in North America, Asia and Europe have expressed concern Beijing is trying to export its way out of its own economic difficulties, with heavily subsidized Chinese products flooding the market at cheap prices. Drew Thompson from Singapore's Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy says China is doubling down on its export-driven model to grow its economy.
China's economic policy is based on subsidizing the means of industrial production rather than improving the economic conditions that would stimulate domestic consumption.
Analysts expect Beijing to retaliate, which could come in the form of targeting Canadian products. Laura Westbrook for CBC News, Hong Kong.
Canada's relationship with the United States is expected to dominate discussion in Halifax today. It's the final day of the cabinet retreat. The partnership between the two countries has been a key priority for the Trudeau government ahead of this year's American election. Kate McKenna is covering the retreat.
You know, the U.S. and Canada are neighbors. That's true in a geographic sense, obviously, but it's also true in a much deeper sense.
When U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan made a surprise visit to the federal cabinet retreat, he was effusive in his praise.
I just want to take a moment especially to say thank you to the Prime Minister, who has been a tremendous partner to President Biden.
For the final day of the retreat, the focus will shift to U.S.-Canada relations and maintaining that positive relationship. Ambassador Kirsten Hillman is expected to address cabinet, so are two former ambassadors. It's part of the Trudeau government's focus on its Team Canada strategy, a plan to create jobs and increase trade. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly.
We will engage, notwithstanding who is elected in the White House. We've gone through an Obama administration, we've worked with the Trump administration, and we have worked with the Biden administration, and we will be ready when it comes to November.
The strategy is similar to what Canada did after Trump won the 2016 election. Canadian officials traveled through the United States, making the case for continued cooperation between the two countries. Ottawa has already begun talks with members of Donald Trump's circle about avoiding new trade tariffs if he's elected U.S. president this fall. We're expecting to hear an update on how this plan is going sometime today. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Halifax.
Both Russia and Ukraine have been on the offensive overnight. A bulldozer digs through rubble in the central Ukrainian city of Kryvyi Rih. Local officials say at least 2 people were killed when a Russian missile struck a hotel. Russia did not comment on that report, but the governor of Russia's Belgorod region says Ukrainian forces are trying to punch through the border. Hundreds of Ukrainian troops reportedly tried to attack 2 checkpoints. The United Nations says it has to pause the movement of aid within Gaza. Officials say safety concerns and a new Israeli evacuation order in central Gaza is affecting their operations. The Israeli military claims it is working to dismantle Hamas infrastructure it says still remains there. Sasha Petrusik is following developments from Jerusalem.
Tents cling to the sand at the edge of Gaza, almost falling into the sea. We used to play on these beaches, says one man. Now it's the only place left to live. 90% of Gaza's population has been displaced. Now more than 250,000 have been told to move again, ordered out of Deir al-Bala in the south so that Israeli military operations can continue. Israel says Hamas fighters are hiding there. Premature babies and injured patients are moved from Al-Aqsa Hospital, one of the last major facilities left, now emptied. Others form long lines at the few aid distribution sites still open. We've been injured getting aid, but there's no choice, says a man as he waits. NGOs like Doctors Without Borders are considering pulling out. UN work is at a standstill. Louise Wateridge is with UNRWA, the main organization helping Palestinians.
The humanitarian operations are just shrinking because of these displacement orders. So lives are being lost, people are not receiving aid. It's just a complete disaster for us trying to do our jobs on the ground here.
That's not likely to change soon, as Israel plans continued operations throughout the south. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Water cannons and tear gas are being used on protesters in Kolkata, India this morning. Security guards around the state's government's buildings are trying to force them out. People across India continue to demand justice for a trainee doctor who was raped and murdered at a Kolkata hospital earlier this month. Some doctors are still refusing to see non-emergency patients. A police volunteer has been arrested in connection with the case. India's federal police are still investigating. Ontario and Quebec provincial police have issued an Amber Alert. They're looking for a 5-year-old boy named Shigao Getty. Police say he was abducted last night in Brossard on Montreal's South Shore. Officers say the boy may be inside a white 2024 Model 3 Tesla with an Ontario license plate. The suspect is a 65-year-old woman named Yang Rei Shui. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward. Pedestrian-only streets are becoming more popular in Canadian cities. Local businesses get more foot traffic and tourists enjoy strolling freely on the streets. But in Banff, Town Council is granting their pedestrian-only zone just a few more days of operation. As Acton Clarkin tells us, the area was not popular with some people who call the town home.
Banff Avenue is the main artery through one of Canada's tourism hotspots. It turns into a car-free zone every year from the May long weekend to Thanksgiving, an initiative that began during the pandemic. But not everyone who lives there loves it.
It pushes all of the commercial traffic, trucks, buses, and vehicles into the residential neighborhood.
That's former Banff Mayor Leslie Taylor. She's firmly against the pedestrian zone, citing traffic and emergency evacuation concerns. Her side narrowly won out in a recent town plebiscite against zone supporters, forcing council to pass a binding bylaw on Monday to open the street back up to cars early this summer and stopping the ped zone from coming back in years ahead. The original plan was to start the dismantling on Tuesday, but a last-minute proposal passed by council will see the work pushed back by a week until the day after Labor Day. Hugh Pettigrew is a local councillor.
I think this represents a fair and balanced approach that honors a democratic decision while also allowing our community a brief period to transition and adapt.
That includes local restaurants. Many have set up patios on the blocked-off road. The town of Banff says after this weekend they'll have to pack up their gear, and contractors will start to remove planters, bollards, and bike racks too. Acton Clarkin, CBC News, Calgary.
15 years ago, when Oasis broke up, the band broke the hearts of fans around the world, but the English rockers are reuniting. Brothers and co-founding members Liam and Noel Gallagher have apparently put aside their differences. This morning, they announced 14 concert dates in the UK and Ireland for summer 2025. They include 4 nights at London's Wembley Stadium and 4 dates in their hometown of Manchester. Plans are also in the works for the band to tour outside Europe. That is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're listening to CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Bit of a cooler start to our day this morning. Forecast and your morning commute details in a moment. Well, next week, students are going to be heading back to class. There's some changes in Manitoba, though. One of them is a cell phone ban. So wondering whether or not that's going to actually cause some anxiety for some kids who are used to having that phone in hand, maybe for connection, maybe for research. Maybe they're worried about what they're going to do without it. So we're going to have some of those new anxiety conversations for 2024 coming up with some help, of course, in how to have those conversations with your kids this half hour on the program. In addition, you've been sending us photos from the backyards to the beaches, from pictures of solitude in swimming pools to hanging out with your buddies on a golf course. We asked you what your favorite moments in Manitoba this summer have been, and we'll get to some of your stories this hour. And if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see some of the pictures that have been coming in. So check us out there, Information Radio and CBC Manitoba's feed on YouTube right now. We are live, also live from our news center at 8:11. Megan Ketcherson is here with our morning headlines. Hi, Megan.
Hello there. Well, a traveling Midway may have to tear down its carnival for good because of new federal rules. Wonder Shows has been a staple of Manitoba summer fairs for years, but that could be in jeopardy. The federal government is restricting the number of temporary foreign workers it accepts. The owner of the fair is worried that'll hurt his business because around half his staff are seasonal workers from Jamaica. And the mystery of the drone that was knocking at the door and getting up close and personal with the Arkells on Friday night is close to being solved. At the Burt Block party, a little drone kept flying low above the crowd and within meters of the lead singer. The band would like the footage, but it turns out it was illegal. We'll find out what happened coming up.
All right. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
It is time to check in on our forecast with Abby Adeyemi. Hi, Abby.
Mostly cloudy conditions down south here, but the northern part of the province enjoying mainly sunny conditions. Thompson, Churchill, it's sunny there right now. Thompson is at 4 degrees heading to 20, and Churchill sunny at 10 heading to 17. Winnipeg is at 13 degrees at this time. It's going to be mostly cloudy today. We can see the sun struggling to make its appearance, but that won't be happening. We're just going to get mostly cloudy conditions today and heading for a high of 20. Though no rain in the forecast, but these cloudy conditions should be clearing up by tonight, and then we cool down to 9 degrees. Other regions down south, it's the same condition, mostly cloudy conditions. We're seeing temperatures hovering between 9 and 12 degrees at the moment. The only part down south is Dauphin, enjoying some sunny conditions at 9 degrees, heading to a high of 23.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Chloe Friesen is here this morning and has had, a quiet morning on the commuter line. How's it now?
Yeah, fairly quiet. We've gotten 2 calls so far. So we heard from Julie that traffic is very slow on Donald if you're heading southbound. Just at Broadway, you do lose your 2 left lanes due to construction. So when Julie called about an hour ago, things were backed up a couple of blocks, but it could be backed up even further at this point. If you have any updates, I would love to hear from you. Also, Margaret called just recently about a fender bender on westbound Wells at Academy. You can get around. It is easy to maneuver around, but just reminder to do so carefully and to watch out for that fender bender westbound Wells at Academy. And thank you, Margaret, for that call. If there's anything you would like to add to that list, I would love to hear from you. 204-788-3093.
Well, next week they go back. Most students in Winnipeg go back to class on September 4th. So that's a week from tomorrow. And if you're a family who has students at home, then I probably don't have to tell you because it's been circled maybe on the kitchen calendar for a while. The change, though, means that it's back to a routine and, of course, the new sleep schedules and, of course, a new grade and maybe a new school. But also in 2024, something that you might have had in hand as a student that you're not going to be able to have in hand, depending on your grade level. As we've been reporting, the Manitoba government is banning the use of cell phones starting this September. So how is all of this and the cell phone ban going to impact students' anxiety over the next school year? To talk about it, Dr. Joanne Unger is clinical psychologist and president of the Manitoba Psychological Society. Good morning.
Good morning.
How does anxiety at this time of year for a student rate for, over general anxiety over other things? Is it a real thing, a real concern?
Yeah, certainly. So anxiety in of itself is an emotion, and we all have it, and we all have certain amounts of it. So certainly change is a big factor in increasing stress and increasing anxiety and worry about all those different changes. So you had a great list there of all the changes kids are experiencing. And some kids will experience anxiety in rates that are more than is adaptable or more than is manageable. And then that's when we get into issues of anxiety disorders and things like generalized anxiety disorder and socialized anxiety disorder. So there's a wide range and spectrum in terms of what an individual person or child will experience in terms of anxiety.
What if a parent right now listening is saying, my child never had anxiety about back to school, but this year they do? And they kind of feel like it came out of nowhere. Are there different points at which that might kick in for a student, like who otherwise maybe has not had anxiety?
Certainly. So we certainly can see some developmental changes for kids as they get older, right? So their brains are developing, the way they think about the world is changing, their personal experiences have changed. So for some kids, there's generally often a temperament that a kid will have, that's a genetic disposition that some kids have. They're a little bit more anxious, and as they develop, that might show up in different ways as they get older. And for some kids, it can feel like, and for some families, it can feel like it's just started this year for some particular reason. Sometimes we can figure it out, sometimes we can't. But sometimes it does have a start, and there can be, we know that there's both environmental and genetic factors that play into the timing of that.
Some of the stress obviously is because of the perception that you're going to lose your support network. So it's like, what will I do without the teacher that helped me in a new grade, or maybe the friends that, might not be in your class in the year. The other thing is the phone. So for students that won't be able to have the phone, how might that contribute to anxiety?
Absolutely. It'll be different for different kids, of course, but for some kids who have particularly become very used to having immediate access to their phone and the different apps or different connections that they make, or the different games or uses that they have, or that they're really used to that for a variety of reasons. So we use our phones for many different things. So things like connecting with others when we're bored, as a way to kind of avoid problems or different situations in our lives. So if we've used that as a connection or as a coping in some way, and we remove that completely, certainly there's going to be some anxiety about how will I manage. And we might actually, so some kids may think, I'm going to be fine. And then school rolls around. So you might have a delayed effect. So some kids might be worried about before school starts. And some kids are going to experience it after, when it's actually removed. And they kind of go, oh, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would your advice be around how families might deal with that? Should they do trial periods in their personal life to put the phone away, or is there a way to manage it?
Yeah. So I would, if at all possible, try practicing ahead of time. So there's a lot of changes that happen with school start. So just like you were talking about sleep, getting sleep in order, this is something that parents and families can also do to try to prepare for not having access to their phones or devices, is practice doing that in this week before school starts in small, gradual ways so that they get a little bit used to it and isn't such a big change. What's going to be a little bit helpful is that everyone will be in the same boat. So that's one of the positives.
It's not
of
like
kind
you're
of
missing
doing,
out in a conversation because everyone's on socials.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your friend is having this experience too. It's not just you. They're
Or
not
they
on
have a
their
leg
phone.
up on an assignment. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a helpful piece, but it's still a big change for a lot of kids, and it's going to be bumpy.
We talk about sleep every year. You were here last fall. We talked about sleep. You raised it just now, the change in routine. What is a lack of sleep? How rather does a lack of sleep affect potentially your mental health?
Absolutely. So there's a big connection. Actually, more than sometimes we realize for both children and adults, how sleep can impact our mental health. And one of the things sleep does is it helps us regulate our emotions. It gives us that energy to be able to manage stressors, to be able to manage our emotions, and pay attention and do all the things that we do in a day with our brain. And so when our brain doesn't get the rest that it needs, it can impact our functioning and our emotional wellness, and then that impacts our relationships. So chronic sleep deprivation can have significant impacts on our mental health. Once in a while, not getting enough sleep, we're going to be okay. Our brains are really great at bouncing back, but if it's good to get into some good habits. So that's why it's a little bumpy at the beginning of school year when we transition to making sure we get enough and we move all our wake times and bedtimes. But if we can get that in a good way, we don't have to worry for the long-term effects unless it's a chronic issue.
What would you say to a student listening right now that might be nervous but might feel like they have to mask it? Because they have friends that are like excited and they want to be excited too, but they just aren't feeling it. Do you have any advice for sort of, I don't know, maybe how to be gentle with yourself this fall?
Absolutely. So, and also be gentle with yourself, but also find a person to chat with. So find a safe person, whether that's a grown-up or a peer that you feel safe and you know that will be accepting and be able to listen to you, and to have that space and that support to talk about how you're feeling. That's an act of compassion too. So it is very normal, first of all, to feel nervous. I remember even after being away from holidays as an adult, feeling nervous about going back to work. Right? So this is a pretty normal thing.
And sad sometimes.
Sometimes sad.
Sorry, listeners. I love my job, but I'm wanting you too.
Absolutely. So it's normal. Find someone to chat with that you can think about how you might take care of that feeling.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Appreciate it. Have a great fall.
Thanks, you too.
That's Joanne Unger, clinical psychologist and president of the Manitoba Psychological Society.
As the world of advertising gets more and more cluttered, ad placements are showing up in some unique spaces, like on sheep, in urinals, and commuters' armpits on crowded subways. Wacky ad spaces on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly, Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
Well, I have a small correction now, and I apologize. Joanne Unger is, of course, a clinical psychologist, but past president of the Manitoba Psychological Society, the past president. It is 8:22 a.m. right now. In Winnipeg, it's 13 degrees, and it's partly cloudy. Well, you might be this morning feeling a little bit of, oh no, it's cooler. What about summertime? We still have many beautiful days left, but it did prompt us to ask a question on Facebook today, and that question is, what has been your Manitoba moment of the summer so far? And I know there's still time, but let's get through some pictures here that you've been sending in, because you sent in a whole bunch of different things to us. So if you're on YouTube, you're going to see these gorgeous photos coming up. This first one is Batula Lake. It just looks like it's so gorgeous. You can see the sheen of the lake is so clear that you can see the clouds and the reflection. That came from Mel. Chloe earlier was talking about grain elevators and photos over the fields out around Killarney. Also a gorgeous shot. Get that one up after Batula. Here it is. Just gorgeous. The silhouette of the grain elevator in the background and one of those epic sunsets that we've had this year. We also have people just writing in about the simple things. Here's one of our listeners with the sunshine on her face, leaning back in a chair. Love that. There's fields of gold everywhere, and you're capturing these beautifully. So we have photos of the fields that are coming up. You can see one here on YouTube that came in from one of our listeners as well. And I'm always impressed by the different colors. Like sometimes the sky looks just, emerald, like emeraldy. Other times it looks like really deep blue. This is that pale, gorgeous blue contrasting with the gold field. Next photo here is actually someone that writes to us regularly. Good morning, Kev Roberts. Kev goes disc dogging with his doggo, and that's what he's doing there, holding a frisbee in that photo, checking it out and having a good summer doing that. Some of you are writing into us about where you visited this year. So look at this photo coming up of Tullabee Falls. Just stunning if you made it up to Tullabee Falls like Heather Neufeld did. She wrote into us this morning. One of my favorite pastimes is also Alfred Lesko's. Here he is. He wrote in golfing with these guys at beautiful Buffalo Point was one of the highlights of his summer. He's got a picture of his golf crew up there that he's sharing with us. And moving on to a couple more, we also have just shots from the various beaches coming up. This is Constance on one of the beautiful beaches in Manitoba. And then we have photos of people having dinners on the beach. So Maureen sent this in. She had folks in from out east, and we're looking at a picture now, just for the radio listeners here. This is a lobster dinner that they had on Grand Beach on the sand. That looks awesome. And a couple more here to share with you. Many of you have been writing in about the joys of going tubing in Manitoba. Some of you saying that you discovered that this summer and were impressed and surprised in Pinawa to find an experience that some were saying rival what would have been happening in BC, but at a cheaper rate and with fewer crowds. So beautiful picture here from Jillian Chester. And from the water to the skies, we got pictures as well coming in of Northern Lights. Whitney Hodgins here with her photo of Northern Lights. Looks like you got a really beautiful night there. And the final photo we're putting up is classic, and I love this because it goes to show that no matter what your budget is, no matter where you are, you can always enjoy summertime in Manitoba. Here's Squirrely Q, who bought a inflatable backyard pool for herself as an adult, and there's her toes sticking up over the edge. I love that. So thanks to everyone who sent in some photos of your favorite Manitoba moment this summer. If you want to still share, please do. That is my Marcy Marcusa page, and during the show it acts as a show page. Thought we'd touch that on a day where we're just going to get to 20 degrees and where this morning, dare I tell you, we started below zero in Thompson. Thompson was at -1 early this morning when we first got on the air. Well, 8:26 is the time right now, and speaking of all these beautiful photos, here's Hotel Mira and Oh Sunshine.
I can tell you mean it when you say you're looking for someone to keep you strange. And I could give you reasons you could stay, but everything just feels so far away. And now I really wish that we could drop the act, but she said it all when she was drunk, so she could take it back. Oh, sunshine, she's raining. Oh, God, now it's hitting me differently. I'm giving, she's taking. She's so cool with it, killing me. I haven't put my guard up in a week. What's another night on the trapeze? A leopard print coat and a monster mask, and I set it off from time to time when it gets really bad. Oh, sunshine, she's raining. Oh, God, now it's hitting me differently. Humanity was such a big mistake. Now I really wish that we could drop the act, The broken bones and jokes I told could never get a laugh. Oh, sunshine, she's right there. Oh, God, now it's hitting me differently.
Hotel Mira out of Vancouver and Oh Sunshine, their new EP is called I Am Not Much Help. Love the title. It's out now. You can check it out. 8:28. We got news time coming up at 8:30. A little bit cooler in Winnipeg and across the province as well. Just mentioned Brandon's 10, Thompson's 4, in addition to Winnipeg's 13 degrees. Commute has been moving just fine. Well, Radio Noon is on from noon to 1 here on CBC, as you can imagine. And between 12:30 and 1, they have their call-in conversation. So today's Radio Noon call-in is around the flag. Is Manitoba's flag a drag? Should we fly a new flag in our province? According to a recent poll, Manitobans are evenly split, and for some serious reasons as well, when you look at the history of how this flag was created. So if you were in charge of redesigning the flag, what would you put on it? What image or symbol do you think best represents Manitoba, and what is outdated, maybe offensive to you, or just plain you don't think it represents us anymore? David Kendall with Manitoba's Vexillological Association is going to join the conversation. And if you want to be in the conversation live, Brittany Greenslate's going to be guest hosting Radio Noon today between 12:30 and 1. If you can't call live at that time, maybe your lunch hour is busy, you can always leave a message about your thoughts on Manitoba's flag. 204-788-3797 is the listener line for Radio Noon. Right now, your CBC Radio News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg at 8:30. Mostly cloudy and 12. Another cooler day today, mainly cloudy with a high of 20. One downtown Winnipeg restaurant owner says the hybrid work week costs him a lot of business. Under a new federal policy, civil servants will be required to spend at least 3 days a week in the office. Bruce Smets with the White Star Diner says that's good news, but he says the days of pre-pandemic business are gone.
Like our business over the last 8 months has really improved. Like it's gotten much better, but I don't think it'll ever be back to what it was before. So, but we're profitable and making money. And
Smith says his restaurant is only busy on the days when workers are downtown. He wishes more of them would be in the area 5 days a week. The federal rules for a hybrid work week start next month. Manitoba Hydro and MPI have hybrid work weeks. Neither has any plans to expand to full-time office work for employees. A traveling Midway may have to tear down its carnival for good because of a new federal rule. Wonder Shows has been a staple at Manitoba summer fairs for years, but that could be in jeopardy. The federal government is restricting the number of temporary foreign workers it accepts. Wonder Shows owner Ken Kernicki is worried that'll hurt his business. Around half of his staff are seasonal workers from Jamaica. Kernicki says the new rules limiting foreign workers could be devastating for his business.
If I don't get them, I'm going to shut my doors because I just can't find people to work. I mean, we advertise. Nobody's coming looking for this kind of job. It's been tough our whole life, and it seems to be tougher now.
It's unclear at this point if Wonder Shows will be impacted by the new policy. The feds are planning to refuse applications for low-wage workers in areas of high unemployment. Details have not been announced. A woman is in critical condition in hospital after a car pedestrian crash last night. Police say it happened around 9:30 on McPhillips Street near McCrae. The driver did stay at the scene. Lanes were closed in the area until about 4 o'clock this morning. The traffic division is investigating. In international news, for a second straight night, Russia has fired barrages of drones and missiles into Ukraine. Multiple cities were targeted, including the capital Kyiv, where the strikes were responsible for at least 4 deaths. Anna Cunningham has more.
Throughout the night, air raid sirens rang out in the capital Kyiv and across the country.
I think the Russians, from a tactical point of view, are trying to overwhelm Ukrainian air defences.
Professor Michael Clark is the former director of RUSI, the UK-based Royal United Services Institute.
Undoubtedly, this is Putin's attempt to, as it were, regain the narrative to show that this is Russian momentum and that the Russians have got every intention and the capability of making life miserable for the Ukrainians over the winter.
Today's attack has been less heavy than Monday when Russia launched over 200 drones and missiles.
Putin doesn't have a lot of options on the table, really.
Peter Dickinson is editor of the Atlantic Council Ukraine's alert service.
He's deployed his entire army almost to Ukraine. The only real option he has is to escalate his air war.
Ukraine's air defense forces are now warning that the entire country is under threat of a ballistic weapons attack. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Residents in southeast Winnipeg may soon have a new rec facility. The city has put out a request for a feasibility study on a Bona Vista Recreation Centre. Plans for the new recplex in the area go back as far as 2009. St. Vital councillor Brian Mays says the community needs a new facility to serve its growing population.
There's no library. There's no running track. I think these people deserve some sort of community facility where they can meet. So hopefully we can get all three levels of government on the same page and get this thing built.
The new facility will serve a population of more than 10,000 people in Sage Creek and Bona Vista neighborhoods. The mystery of the drone that was knocking at the door of Arkel's lead singer is close to being solved. During Friday's show at the Burt Block Party, a little drone kept flying low over the crowd within a few meters of singer Max Kerman. In a social media post, he talked about how he developed a bit of a relationship with the drone, motioning it to come towards him, then shooing it away. Turns out it was an illegal drone, and Winnipeg police gave the operator a warning. Kerman has a message for police.
So, Winnipeg police, we want the footage. It looked like it was going to be kind of cool footage.
So yesterday, the mystery operator came forward to the band and had a message for Kerman.
I definitely got a wicked relationship with you two. That was so cool. I really appreciate you for even doing that. Like, trust me, it's wild. But yeah, I have the footage. So let me clean it up and I'll send it to you.
Winnipeg police say it is illegal to operate a drone without a permit at outdoor events. The drone operator, despite the warning, police say the police were very nice to him. And that's the news from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you for the morning, Megan Ketcherson.
Thank you.
Also, thanks to Joni Nicolo, who's in our news department this morning, and our live team, Brad Lillies, Abby Adiyemi, and Chloe Friesen. Speaking of whom, how is the final word in the commute, Chloe?
There's my mic. Not too bad. We could still be looking at slow traffic on Donald heading southbound at Broadway. You're losing your two left lanes due to construction. So that could still be getting in your way throughout the day. But other than that, a lovely morning commute.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, Abby, take it away.
Cloudy conditions across the province this morning, my friend. We're seeing temperatures climbing from 17 to 23. And tonight, clear skies, and then it's going to cool off, and temperatures will be dropping between 6 and 10 for most of the regions. But for tomorrow, the sun is going to make its appearance, and we're going to see warmer temperatures. So,
wait for it.
Wait for it.
All right, Abby, you did it.
I did it.
You got up early. You're still awake. After vacation, it's always a thing.
I remember the buttons.
We'll have to do it all again tomorrow. We are back here again. Thank you for listening, everybody. I'm Marcy Marcus on behalf of our entire team, and that means all of our associate producers that work in our current affairs unit and work so hard on the shows and book our guests. Big thanks to our guests this morning as well, who were joining us to shed light on important conversations in Manitoba and elsewhere. Thank you. And thanks to our leaders in units. So this week it is Wendy Parker, producer in unit, as well as Nelly Gonzalez, who's acting producer of senior producer of audio here at CBC Manitoba right now. Take care, be well. The Currents coming up next.